States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the roll recorded. Janet?
Thank you, President Faino. Tonight we're starting with the Academics Committee, and there are several reports, all for Mr. First, to present to us. Before he begins, I just wanted to mention a program that is being run by the teachers of our gifted students. It's called Operation Rover Nation, and it's number 1 under the news flash on the website, and I have something to read about it so I don't forget the salient points here. Operation Rover Nation is being launched by the Easton Area School District Gifted Department as a long-term service project for the district and surrounding community. Students, clubs, and organizations, classroom families, and community members can sponsor a deployed service member with a monthly care package through the end of the school year and beyond if they choose to extend their commitment. Each care package costs roughly $15 to $30 before shipping costs. People can also support and contribute to the cause by donating items or cash for care packages. They can also purchase a t-shirt or sweatshirt to help pay for postage. There's going to be a dress down day to help collect money as well. And they're hoping to keep this project going with longevity. I myself have a female soldier whose name is Sarah, and we've emailed twice, and she's in desperate need of shampoo and hair conditioner. So I can't wait to get that to her. At the end of every month, the gifted students are going to pack the boxes. You don't have to do that. They'll do it for you. There's a list of recommended items that are allowed to be sent, and the packing days are going to be highly excited for the students. We'll get to do that. Even before sending information to the student body, there are nearly 40 deployed service members taking part in this. It's Hero Box, and please mention this to anybody who might be interested in doing it. And it's number 1 right now on the news flash. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. First.
Okay, thank you. I was asked to present this evening, and I have my cousin Jeanette Cassis here also to help with the presentation wherever it's needed. We wanted to revisit the situation of adding four units of math and science at the high school. Can I have the next slide? Just as a review, we currently have in place 24.5 credits for graduation at the high school, 4 credits in English, 4 credits in history, 3 credits in science, 3 credits in math, 2 credits in physical education, a half credit in health, and 8 credits in total electives, 2 credits of which come from the humanities. So that is where we stand right now. If you could hit the next slide so you can just see this here. Just to review, we have a variety of math courses stemming from Algebra 1 and going all the way through Calculus 2. And correct me if I'm wrong, I even think we have a statistics course that some of our students opt for. Is that a semester course?
No, it's a full year course.
That's an AP course, right?
AP and honors, and we also have Calculus 3 now as well.
And Calculus 3, okay. So we actually have 9 courses that a person could possibly take. Just as an aside, in the past, and one of the things that we corrected with our current schedule at the high school that was a problem was that we had issues with students. If they didn't take Algebra 1 by 8th grade, they were not going to get into calculus. And that was an overriding concern for many parents who felt that their child may not have been ready in 8th grade for algebra, because not every child is. But if they did not take it, they could not sequence without great difficulty, may I add. And I would say, practicality, it was not possible to get the calculus, which to some people is an absolute necessity for what they want to do. One of the things we did was we said, well, if you still take Algebra 1 by 9th grade, you can still take calculus. That is possible right now with the way we have it sequenced. I'd like to move just quickly to slide number 7. I'd like to forward to that quickly, just to try to illustrate to you that under our current system, if you look at the second highlight there about math, we have 488 out of 648 seniors who are currently enrolled in math. Many of those students are taking it because it's their 4th year of math. We have some students that have to make up a math course, but I would say that the vast majority of them take the 4th year as an elective. So we have a large majority of our students involved with taking math. So I wanted to forward to that quickly. If we could go back to slide, or if we could go to slide 4. So that's math. Science. We have in science about 5 here. We have earth and space science, we have biology, chemistry, environmental science, and physics. We also have the AP side of those things too. Again, in slide 7, which I don't want you to jump to, but we'll see it again. We currently have close to 70% of our students taking a 4th year of science, and only 50 of those are retaking it for the 3-credit requirement that is currently in place. So that shows that we already have a vibrant student body interested in taking science and math, and it is something that they opt to do themselves as a result of counsel with their families. If you could go to slide 5. Option 1, as we have discussed in the past, would be to add a 4th credit in science and a 4th credit in mathematics. If you would just simply do that and keep the current electives in place, you would move to 26.5 credits, which is certainly doable, but that would be adding extra costs, which I will break down. So that's option 1. If I can see slide 6. Option 2 on page 6 would be to add the 4th credit in science, add the 4th credit in mathematics, reduce by 2 units the total electives. So people would have 6 electives to take. We would maintain under Chapter 4 regulations the 2 units for the humanities. So we would maintain our 24.5 credits for graduation. It would be essentially a wash. So that is option 2. We have looked at that, and now page 7 again, if you could, if you will. Again, what we currently have here this is the data from the senior class. If you even take a look at the 8th grade class coming in, it is larger than the current classes at the high school, so I kind of did the math with them in mind also. We would need an additional 2 teachers, ultimately 2 in science and 2 in math, to take on the extra course load that is currently in place. The question would be, obviously, well, can't we absorb it with our current staff? The answer is no, because we are maximized with our current staff. That's something I did several years ago, which also resulted, obviously, in a reduction in staff. So we would need to hire at least 4. And on page 8, if you could go to page 8, the first bullet point there, it says we need at least 4 to 5. 5 is on the high side. I think 4 to 5 is essentially correct, given the numbers that are coming through 8th grade. And I go back as far as 7th grade, and you'll see that the numbers are higher also in 7th grade. So to kind of cushion ourselves, I'm figuring 4 to 5 teachers. The teachers that would be recalled, and Mr. Castrovinci can correct me on this if I'm wrong, would be people who were already in our system, would have the option to come back first. So we would not be funding this with teachers who are starting at step 1. Many of them would be making a lot more money than what a beginning teacher would be started. So a conservative estimate is between $400,000 and $500,000 to eventually fund what we need for the staff. Additional textbooks and resources. Textbooks, as you know, are expensive. The additional students coming in, I would say we would not be spending any more, but it could be up to $50,000 total for the extra resources. And that includes things such as adding additional labs where we would have to, although I don't have that priced out to the penny because that would have to be studied a little more in terms of making that transition happen. The remediation and staffing, as I spoke to our a director of special education, and I even spoke to some people who are involved with ELL. They all seem to think that with this additional fourth unit of math and science, that it would be very difficult in that some of our students, according to their specific IEPs and needs, do certain projects, do certain things that would almost have to be redone. Could they do it? Yes, they could do it. I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying it would be difficult. We would have to add, additional support staff to make that happen. And I'm estimating no higher, but up to and including $150,000 over time for that. Career-bound and non-traditional students will be adversely affected because right now many of them opt out to do certain projects in their senior year. They want to, obviously by that time they know what they're going to specialize in. They would have to take that extra course. So we would see a reduction in the number of courses that they would have to take, which could end up in a reduction in staff there. Special needs and ELL students not functioning at grade level may also be adversely affected with the additional course requirements. How that could be remediated, I said, we could certainly get people to help us tutor them and make sure that they get through that extra level of math and science. Finally, graduation and course guides will need to be revised and board approved. That's not a big deal, but I wanted you to be aware of that. I guess my overriding concern is, given our current budget situation over time, and I have a plan here that we could do this over time, we would be adding to that, and that's something that you have to consider. It is certainly not a deal breaker by any means, but it is adding additional staff to the high school when we certainly are looking to try to retain our fund balance and keep ourselves, in budget. Page 9, recommendations. We have two things here I would like to share with you. Given what I have presented to you and some of the other challenges that I feel we would be facing, to retain the current scheduling structure, at least for the 2013 school year, and convene a district-wide committee to review it, just like we did with trying to implement the current schedule. That actually was a grassroots level event that involved a wide variety of stakeholders. And despite the fact we had some trouble at times getting that implemented, if you talk to people now, I think you're going to find out that there's a great deal of success with the current schedule at the high school. The administration has discussed it and would like to retain it for the upcoming school year and convene a committee to give the board by December 2013 a final report with recommendations for implementation, if any. I expect there will be, but I want to cover all the bases with that for the following school year. If that is not satisfactory and the board does choose to implement the 4 units of math, this is our specific recommendation. I think there was discussion at this meeting last time about, all right, if we don't do it all the way through and make everyone do it right now, can we implement it with, let's say, the current 9th graders or the incoming 8th graders? And the answer is certainly yes, and I think it makes a lot of sense that if the incoming 8th graders are tagged as the class that we want to start this with, it makes a lot of sense because they are also the ones that are going to be keystone graduation requirements. They're students of that, meaning that they have to pass all the keystones that are out there in order to graduate. So it would make sense to use them as the incoming class. So if the board decides that, look, Steve, we hear the recommendations, but we'd like to see this, can we do it? We certainly can. We're just recommending, though, that why don't we do it with the incoming 8th graders, who would be 9th graders to start next year. This will not cause as much fuss because we can redo the guides and let them know, put them on notice now, you will be required to do the 4 credits in math and science. But it won't cause a big catastrophe in scheduling because we can still schedule for next year. That I think would be the smoothest transition. I've spoken this over with Mike Huck about how that could work, and that certainly could work. And I think that makes the most sense because I think we're starting with a class who has a lot of accountability. Not that the ones now don't, but I'm saying with the keystones in place, I think it would be a good starting point. So that's where I wanted to start the conversation with you. We don't have to go to slide 10 yet. We can talk about that after you have some questions and also some discussion.
I do have a question. If you have a student that takes, say, in Algebra 1 in 8th grade, Algebra 2 in 9th, and say Geometry in 10th, and then they switch and they want to take Accounting 1 and 2 now because they're going to go into business, is that considered a math?
No.
Because generally calculus isn't required for an accounting student. And yet but they should have a jump on it, because if they have Accounting 1 and 2, it's possible they could jump out of Accounting 1 in college.
Right. And you're saying they take Algebra 1 and 8, so they have their 3 core keystones done.
Right.
Yeah. It wouldn't be, Mike, if you want to comment to that.
Dr. Volcano,
Yeah.
our students can take accounting 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
And we have an approved technical education
Right,
program
yes.
for accounting, which students receive articulated credits.
Right.
We have an agreement with North End Community College as well.
Right.
Those students will take those courses alongside of their core math requirements. So a student still could take, our sequencing is Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. Just switch the Algebra and 2 in Geometry. But our students then will take Trig, Pre-Calc in 11th grade, and Calculus in 12th. They only need to do the 3 requirements,
Right.
but they take accounting at the same time. Accounting will count as an elective credit. They also have those higher levels of math alongside of it. So our accounting courses are not in our math sequence.
Yeah.
They are in our
But they are
business.
math related.
Right. When I was here, I took Algebra 1 and 2 and Accounting 1 and 2 at the same time.
And then we also had,
Yeah.
certifications, and Mr. Katchinich knows, with math and business.
Yes.
And our business teachers teach accounting, and our math teachers teach math.
Right.
And so those requirements stay in those areas.
Yeah, and CIT has the same agreement with the NCC with some of their courses,
Correct.
technical courses that they will accept. So
Can you clarify something? Because now that you brought this up, this is a very good point. You had just named really the essential sequencing of math that we need to make sure our students are absolutely competent.
Right.
Not that they shouldn't be in everything, but I'm saying Algebra 1,
Right.
Geometry, and Algebra 2.
Right.
That's your core. And right now, the state has plans to test. At one time, they had plans to test all 3. They scaled that back to test Algebra 1. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, Geometry's next.
Correct.
I have heard that they're going to test out Algebra 2. It's just a matter right now of trying to figure out the financial piece to that, which I think they should, really, because those are your 3 core. But correct me if I'm wrong, if you're prepping for calculus then, what would be the logical next step? Would they take trigonometry and Algebra 3, or would they take pre-calc? Just so we're clear and everybody knows
They would take students going to calculus take pre-calculus. Trig Algebra 3 is more along the lines of a college algebra course, and it's really a preparation for those students. It's almost a direct translation. There are trigonometry concepts, there are pre-calculus concepts, but it mainly prepares students for a college algebra.
Right, and we just wanted to make sure that people understood so that would kind of end their career. They wouldn't move on to calculus in high school, but it would prepare them for calculus in college.
It allows every student that leaves East Narra High School be prepared to enter a 2- and 4-year college with the necessary math background. If they take that 4th year of Trig Algebra 3, even our on-level students, if they take the Trig Algebra 3, are going to be prepared for an entry-level college course and not necessarily have to do an 090 remedial course once they end up on campus.
And I just wanted everyone to understand that, because some may have a question. So what's the difference between that and pre-calc? Pre-calc would be taken before you take the calculus in high school, and the Algebra 3 and trig.
One more question. Accounting 3, I assume, is computer accounting, and Accounting 4 would be advanced accounting,
Both of them are automated, correct?
or automated and advanced
Correct.
accounting. I mean, that's relatively new, Accounting 4. That's something that hasn't been around for a long time.
Steve?
Yeah.
I have 2 questions and a comment, please. The first one, I think I remember from a previous presentation that all 9th grade students currently take a science and a math.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that, in fact, we could start with this group if we wanted to require 4 units of math and 4 units of science to
The
graduate.
current 9th graders.
Yes.
Who would be 10th graders next year.
Yes.
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
Yes.
Second question is, you cite rightly so, that we would need additional math and science teachers because there's going to be an increasing number of load
Over
on science
time,
and math.
if we
Right.
phase it in like you're saying, then it would be over time, and I'll show you that. We could amortize that over time, which would make it a lot less expensive.
Well, I'm not so much talking about phasing it in. I'm saying starting, the discussion among the board so far has been starting with the current ninth grade class.
Right.
But the second part of this is, since we're going to need more teachers in that area, are there not going to be then fewer elective courses that are going to be chosen? And what will that do to the number of teachers required in those areas?
Well, the answer would be yes, and that's why I said the board could choose to go with either adding 2 more units for graduation to 26.5, or retain it at 24, and there would be less, electives overall. The answer is yes.
So
indeed.
wouldn't that logically say that probably there'll be a wash in terms of the number of teachers required? You need teachers teaching different subjects.
Yes, indeed, it could. The only thing I'm going to say is I'll just go back to some of those electives, and including accounting and things of that sort that could be affected by these cuts, are exactly the courses some of our students need in order to prepare for maybe a let's say a career-bound student would be looking to focus more on that than maybe math and science.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because
Right.
I don't disagree at all with your little line of thinking. And really depending on the course requests that we get next year, there may not be any additional costs next year. It may be down the line a year or two, which is why I said, and I'll show you on screen 10 then, that while I'm giving you this worst case, I'm not trying to give a worst case, I'm trying to give you the facts, itemized, that they can be, they can be ameliorated through looking at how it's going to be phased in. That's why I said if you phase it in with 8th grade, it'll be even less. You certainly can phase it in with the current 9th graders. That's really not a problem.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, I really appreciate you putting together the slides.
Right. That's what
I want to make
see.
sure I understand the
Yeah.
situation.
So the answer is absolutely, and we would, we'd have to look at that, especially after the kids' schedule. But we could put all of them on notice that current 9th graders, you will be required to take a 4th year science and math. So plan for it. Right now, that may not change a single plan of theirs for next year, and that's my point. I don't see it as a situation that is going to shut down and we're going to have to redo the whole schedule that way. No. But they will be put on, and we don't even have to redo our guides right now. We'll just put them on notice. You will be, and we can, we'll take the time for next year to make sure the guides are updated to reflect that for 12th grade. Our only recommendation was 8th grade because to me it made sense. They're part of the Keystone cohort, so that would be a good place to start. Can we do that? Certainly.
Right, and the comment would be, just remember the genesis of this discussion. We're looking to increase the rigor for our students so that they have a better opportunity to compete for those areas, the jobs of the future, which are increasingly going to be science and math related, technology related. I think we had a committee meeting in June in which we talked about this extensively. The U.S., the latest data, I think ranks anywhere between 17 and 21 in industrialized countries around the world in science and math education scores. Given the scores of Easton Area School District High School, we lag much farther than that. So, in my opinion, this is not a time to drag our feet. This is a time to accelerate this change.
I have a question about the scheduling. I guess it would be for you, Mike or Jeanette. Has scheduling started? Have students started to do their course request sheets, or when does that
We're
begin?
finalizing the course selection guide right now, and so that course selection will be completed by the end of next week. The 8th graders are the first ones that get their speech from their guidance counselors. First, second week of February, the students grades 9, 10, 11 will get their course selection guide and begin that process in selecting courses. So, in terms of what's being presented here, even with the idea of the 10th graders, part of the dialogue needs to be next school year about sequencing and some of those other things that they're going to have to take a 4th year of math and science. But as far as scheduling is concerned, this decision doesn't necessarily change for 9th or 10th graders the scheduling process. But to answer your question, yeah, we will begin relatively, shortly here.
Soon.
With them selecting and requesting courses. From there, we take those requests and determine staffing and so on and so forth, with our needs.
So, do they get, for electives, let's say, do they list more than one? Like if they can't be scheduled for a course, is there an alternate
Absolutely.
that they put? Okay.
Absolutely.
We're asked to list at least 3 elective courses.
Oh, okay, at least 3. They have to list, okay.
Madam Chairwoman, I have a question for Mr. First. Mr. First is relating to the life cycle of the books that we have now. We implement this and we have to buy new books and resources. Are we going to buy new books and get half the life out of them that we normally get because we're in the middle of our cycle for revision? Or can we get used textbooks at a discount to fill in the lifespan that we need?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly look into that. It might be difficult to get used textbooks that are current, because people really do try to use them that are worn out. I don't necessarily project that we'll have a change in our textbook, although I got to tell you, with all the changes with Common Core, that might be a possibility. So that is something I did factor in the fact. That's why that 50,000 is maybe a little high. It's not real high, but I would say that that would be part of the cost that we could phase in over time. And again, I don't want the bullet points to look like it's here this is a disaster. Well, over time, I think those costs will be realized. But as Dr. Moskaitis has pointed out, there are other things we can look at to kind of even that out in terms of cuts to certain other things that maybe we offer right now.
I just want us to make sure we're considering all our expenses in case we buy a book brand new book we're going to use for a year, and then get a new revision.
Well, sure, right, and that's something that we're always looking at things like that. I just want to say that's the reason why we came here tonight, with one of the options being to try to convene a committee to look at every aspect of that. But again, I realize that this is a very important concept for this board. It was a very important project, and I'm not looking to drag our feet on it. I just wanted to say to you that would be something we could vet out a little bit more thoroughly if we had more people involved, more stakeholders that will be affected, just like we did when we moved to the block or the flex schedule. We had a lot of discussions, and some of them were very frank about how it will impact. So that's why Mike and I were talking, and I had spoken to the superintendent that is one of the recommendations we had suggested.
Thank you, Mr. First. I'm
Sure.
done.
Anyone else?
Question, yes. We're looking at, on page 5, option 1 with 26.5, which could increase rigor. And on option 2, 24.5. And I would assume, Mike, that most of your students are taking at least 6 credits per year. Some of them are taking 7, and I'm sure a lot are taking 8.
That's correct.
So from a scheduling perspective, if we went with the 26.5, that wouldn't really be a problem with scheduling anybody, would it? Initially. If I gave you time to work on that and said, well, your 9th graders are going to be the ones in senior year, they're going to take both.
Now, to be phased over time, it wouldn't create a scheduling issue this year. It wouldn't, it would be
Okay.
something that we would be able to adjust, on a yearly basis.
Okay.
In terms of what they are. The other thing is to gather, that information as more and more students take that 4th year of math and 4th year of science in terms of the staffing, after the request comes.
Yes.
So, there is room in our current schedule to increase the graduation requirements.
Thank you.
Our students can, if they take a full schedule, or they can have up to 32 credits. And so, it's an option. We have plenty of students who by their senior year reach that 24.5 requirement. But we also have quite a few students, as you know as a principal, who just meet that requirement come June 17th when it's time for graduation. And so we have to take all of that into consideration. But like I told Mr. First, our kids are resilient at Easton. And if we tell them in 9th grade they need to be at 26.5 and they need to take 4 math and 4 science, Rovers will reach that goal. That's just how they are.
Basically, Mike, we would cut down on them taking study halls and possibly some, study halls are not the best because a
That's-
lot of kids do not work in them and there's sometimes problems in them.
There's a lot of variables that lead to study halls. It isn't always student option.
Right.
But yes, if you increase the amount of credit requirements, you will reduce it. How much you'll reduce it is left to be determined.
Yeah, right.
Just study halls are a matter of fact. They happen,
Yeah.
and it isn't always because a student wants to not be elected. It's because there isn't necessarily the staffing in certain cases
Right.
for that student to take that course.
Right.
You can't always get what you want, but you can definitely get what you need.
Are there any other questions? Can we just move to slide 10 so that the board can see basically where we're at right now? I guess right now would be the time to sum up and say that I guess a decision by the board this evening to send to the board about adding the 4th unit in math and science would be where we're headed right now, and then the option of either keeping it status quo or adding 2 more credits, as Mr. Ryder said, 26.5 would be where we're at right now. If that could be determined for a vote by next meeting, we could then begin to put things into place, such as the revision of course offerings, and sequencing, the approval and the revision of the new district graduation requirements, which would phase in with whatever class you wanted to choose. And then, obviously, our job then is to make sure our stakeholders are aware of what we're doing and phasing that in properly. We then would finalize our student course request and begin to see how the new requirements would affect, which probably not much. And then finalize any staffing adjustments, which again may not be that much at all. But that would be our timeline for input, and that would be this year from now until spring. So right now, I think we just need for you to decide through a motion how you'd like us to proceed.
President Fano, we do this by consensus, no, or a motion?
Just a consensus of what we want to put on the agenda next week. If we don't come to that, then we list both items on the agenda next week, and then vote yea or nay each one of them.
We'll offer you another week or so to think about what you want to really do, but you could just see what you want to move for the formal meeting.
Okay, so what we have on the table here is choosing one of these options now and putting it on the agenda on the 29th, or putting them both on the agenda for the 29th and vote on either one. Does anyone have any further comments? Could I make, yes, Frank?
Can we just go, should we put them both on the agenda, and then somebody will make a motion on the one they want next week? Or we'll do it that way?
Do it that way.
We
When
can.
you say both on the agenda, what I assume you're saying is
Option.
adding the 4th unit of math and science, and then, and/or adding, either having 24.5 or 26.5 credits.
And I think adding, do you want it to begin with? Yeah, do you want it to begin with this current class of 9th graders, or to begin with the incoming class of 8th graders?
It is possible we could have a motion that combines all 3.
Correct.
I'm
I would
looking
think
at
that'd be
option.
great progress.
I'm looking at option 1 and option 2, and would I be correct in saying that we would put up both option 1 and option 2 on the agenda for the board meeting, and then there will be a vote? Because option 1,
Is increasing the 2 credits.
correct? And option 2 is not increasing the elective credits, but both goes to 4 years of 4 credits of math and science.
Correct.
Okay?
And the only other piece that would be added on then is which group you started.
8th or 9th grade. You really could do it in one motion with those three pieces together. Just say, motion to approve the fourth unit of math and science, effective with the class of whatever you want to do currently, and then, and also increasing graduation credits to reflect that to 26.5 credits. Now, if you don't want that, then you can amend that maybe even before you vote, or I'm sure legal counsel can tell you, obviously, if you vote on it and it fails, you may have to wait another meeting to bring it back. So, whatever you want to do to make it streamlined, you can certainly do.
But if you let it open, then you can decide right there.
Right.
But one motion can go up. If the motion fails, you can do a second motion. You can do a third motion.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move option 1 with implementation with the 8th grade class to, is this the time to do that?
No, this is just a recommendation for what will show up on the agenda.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to see option 1 on the agenda.
Is that the 24.5 option?
That's the 26.
That's it, okay. I'm sorry, I'm getting myself then. Thank you. Thank you, bro. Option 1, which is the 26.5.
Okay. Do we do motions at committee meetings?
However you want to take it to get a consensus. You're just going for consensus at this point.
So consensus would then be the 26.5. Then the other part of that motion would be this ninth grade course, this ninth grade group would be then as seniors, the first group to pick up 4 by 4.
We could work, I mean,
Yes.
if you want us to work on that during the week to come up with a more streamlined motion, we could certainly do that.
I think that can be wordsmithed
Yeah.
quite well by the 29th, but it seems to me that's what we're,
But that's the
what we've
consensus.
been, yes.
For 4 credits for
Yes.
both 26.5, beginning with the 9th grade class. Okay? I think we can
Okay.
get that together.
All right. Okay, next.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for putting that together. Your next topic is Keystone's Opportunity / Comprehensive Plan.
And I'm going to keep this moving because I know you tire of my voice. I've been told that, and that's okay.
Not
But so
true.
does my wife and my daughter.
True.
I'm gonna give you an update and sort of a little background on Keystones to Opportunity grants, since I think it was on the agenda. I think we finally, after speaking to Janet Matthews, we figured out it was on the agenda, but then it was removed. So I want to give you a little background on that, and then I want to tell you where we're at with it and how we're progressing. And I am pleased to tell you that we are progressing very, very well in terms of what the grant's requiring us to do. But I want to show you that there is quite a bit to it. But I want to tell you right now, I'm not going to go into a full-blown presentation on comp plan. I thought maybe I'd hold off on the more comprehensive presentation until February, but I want to give you a little bit on how they're connected. And that's really what my intent was. Before I get started, one of the things about Keystone Opportunity Grant is that it brought some stakeholders together who have been talking about coming together for years, but we've kind of just talked about it. And that is our pre-K providers here in Easton. And I have brought this evening Carolyn Serva, who is our new Executive Director of Family Connections. I shouldn't say I brought her, I asked her to be here. And she said, certainly. Carolyn, if you want to stand up so they can see, she won't say, please stand up so they can see you. Carolyn is on our KTO committee, has been, and she'll say a few words during this presentation. She has been great to work with. It's been a great transition for us having her. We had a great executive director prior to her coming here, but it has been a great transition. She has been one of our stakeholders for some time and has offered us a lot in terms of what we needed to get this grant going. Good, we're on page 2. The KTO grant, or Keystones to Opportunity, KTO, was really a federal grant that was offered to states to improve the outcome of literacy K through 12. Now, interestingly enough, and some of the confusion is, well, why do we focus on pre-K to 5, or in our case, pre-K to 1? Well, that's because we have the research to show that if we make a strong bond at that point in time, we avoid a lot of problems down the line. But the interesting thing about KTO is they also make us make a connection not only there, but K through 12, which I think is kind of unique because it's something that we have to realize that you can work on having a great K through 12 program, but if you don't have that pre-K piece, it's not going to be as effective. And also, conversely, even if you have a strong K through 1 piece, it's not going to matter if your K through 12 piece in literacy is not connected and fluid. So one of the things that this grant was to do is to link up not only the pre-K to elementary connection, which we really are excited that we're involved with, but to strengthen the K through 12 literacy plan of our school district, something that I know Janet Matthews was involved with when she was here and knows that it's something we have to always revisit because it's so dynamic. In fact, we were just talking about something tonight that I'm going to be looking into, just because there's so many things that are happening that we want to use this grant to help us document what we're doing, and we certainly will bring it back to the board. In fact, there's some things that we have to take to the public and get their input on. If you could go to slide 3. So the Keystones to Opportunity Grant, really just real quick, we were chosen out of 329 school districts that applied here in PA. Eventually only 56 received the grant, which says something about our school district. Yes, we have our challenges, but we also have many things that we are proud of. Our target group is birth through grades 1, and so that's what we chose to focus on. Slide 4. We were awarded approximately $530,000 a year. The grant period will be up by June 30th, 2013, but this funding is really for a 5-year term. Obviously, we are worried with what's happening in Washington if that will actually come to fruition, but the funding that we currently have, we have pretty much a guarantee that it will be here next year, but we're still really waiting to hear about that. What we had to do, though, which was very good, was a needs assessment of our stakeholders. And it was really great having our pre-K, our birth to pre-K people involved with that, because it was their perceptions about the Easton Area School District. So that needs assessment was done. It was extensive. It was actually done during the tenure of Assistant Superintendent Dr. Mara Roberts. I picked up, and if you could go to slide 5, I picked this up after she had left the school district, and at this point in time can tell you that we are making progress. We've had our second site visit, which occurred back in December. It was the 19th of December, which involved one of the representatives from the IU-20 who was working with the federal government, or I should say the state, not the federal government, to monitor our grant came in. Our preliminary outcome was that everything was in line, everything was appropriate, and our next visit will be sometime in the spring. But what they really wanted to know was, how were we making progress? One thing I can tell you is that this grant has a lot of wires to it, and I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean to say is that there's a professional development piece that I will show you in a moment. There is the comprehensive literacy plan piece, and there is the assessment piece. And one of the reasons why, unfortunately, when we came back after Hurricane Sandy, we had a problem trying to adjust our calendar like some other school districts did, was we were locked in with the IU on certain trainings that were locked in with KTO that we had to do, or we would lose our funding. And unfortunately, a lot of the money has been allocated, so it wasn't an option that we really had. So I am working, we are going to start up our CPEC process with our teachers, and we are going to be looking at this closely for next year to make sure that we stay in alignment with the grant, but we'll see if we have some options that if we do have snow days, we aren't as locked in as we were this year. Can't promise that, but that's our plan. On slide 5 here, just so you understand, we are really in a state right now, we have everything moving and implemented, but you may have been hearing some of the complaints that, it added another assessment. Now and I'll show you momentarily, we use DIBELS, and we've always used DIBELS, but we added a couple other things. If we could move to slide 6, I just want to review some of the things that we had to do is we had to work in the required professional development from the IU20. We had to have at least 50% of our teachers involved. And we also had some trainings at the IU20 that involved all of our stakeholders. So that was a piece that we still have in place, and that's what caused some of our problems in trying to reschedule. Slide 7 will show you some of the things that we had to add, and which caused, obviously, anything new causes a little bit of a stress factor. One of the assessments was called HEAT, and that's an acronym for Higher Order Thinking Engaged Learning. And essentially what that is, folks, is we are trying to get our teachers to generate heat, and that is thinking heat in our students. So what this grant is having us do is having our principals, through their normal walkthrough process, look through the eyes of what is known as Bloom's taxonomy, which is a way of looking at instruction, and giving feedback to our teachers in are they moving towards the higher order thinking? When you talk about rigor, rigor works both ways. It works in adding more content, and it also is also deals with how content is taught. And so while we're adding more at the high school, we also have added the aspect of rigor there, where our teachers are trying to work towards more higher order thinking. It's not just the high school, it's K through 12, but that is what HEAT is about. Now, grade. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that is an extra diagnostic evaluation that we've added, and certainly, like anything new, it has been met with challenges, but I have to really thank our teachers, and I have to thank our principals for helping us make grade a success. And over time, we actually believe that the data we will have generated from grade will help us K through 1 to align our partnerships. So that's why we're actually doing that. And obviously, we are required to do it. And obviously, Dibbles Next, I'm sure you've heard of that, which is also, it's known as the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. We use that now in a diagnostic and also in an evaluative tool to help us guide our decision-making for students that need assistance. So that is one piece to the KPO. Slide number 8, and I'm going to have Carolyn talk to you a little bit about her perceptions of this. We have our pre-K people doing some evaluations too. One of them is known as the ITERS, which is the Infant Toddler Environmental Rating Scale, and then the ECHRS, which is the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale. This is all data that we're trying to generate right now in order to take a look at how effective we are doing what we're doing. Carolyn, if you want to come up and just give them some perspective on your involvement with these assessments and just overall with KTO.
I will speak tonight on behalf of Family Connection, but also from the other birth through 5 providers. We were selected to be that link because of our preschool program that we do have, which is the Parent-Child Home Program, and our Kindergarten Connection initiative, which developed the transition plan that you approved about a year and a half ago. The ITERS and ECHRS are scales that daycares are already doing. They're already in place. It's really an environmental scale. It's not an assessment on the child. It's an assessment on the center. So it looks at how many opportunities they have for children to learn, the environment, safety, the interaction between the teachers and students. So those are things that are already in place. The reaction that I've gotten from the other birth through 5 providers has been overwhelmingly positive, that they've been included in this grant and that they're actually being placed at the table where their input can then be taken to the administration and principals of the schools and being used to help school readiness, because they have a wealth of information at their fingertips on the children that are coming into the district. As you all know, there's so many differences between children coming in, kids that went to kindergarten and did not and are starting first grade, children that went to preschool and did not and are starting kindergarten. Those discrepancies are so big. So now we're all at the same table where we can actually stop and assess and look at what works and what doesn't, and how to really blend and, like Mr. First said, align our priorities. How do we improve school readiness so that when that child comes into the district, they already know some of the expectations, and the teachers already know where that child has been and what brought them into their classroom. So it's very exciting for them. It's very exciting for us, again, to be part of the process. I think it's a way to utilize, again, all of our resources and bring the two groups together. as Family Connection, they're starting forums next month where we're bringing our preschool providers to talk to the kindergarten teachers for just a communication, really, to improve that, to look at what best practices are in place, and to inform them of the Common Core standards and what changes are in place for kindergarten so they can better align their programs to what's coming through in the school district. So we're excited about those. We're bringing in United Way to those meetings as well because I think from their perspective, they're really excited about the initiatives that are going on in Easton, and it's something that is not being done in other parts of the Lehigh Valley that they're using us as a model program for. So it's getting notoriety in the community as well.
That's good notoriety. Right?
It is? Yes.
Thank you, Carolyn. So you see, this is something that is quite a bit of extra work right now, but I think in the long run, it will even itself out. We will certainly take a look at how we can streamline what we're doing. But I think the key, and I think Carolyn hit it right on the head, is that we're having conversations with partners that we always talked about having conversations with, and now we are. So I see a lot of benefit coming down the line from this, but I think there's some immediate benefits just by establishing those key partnerships. If we could go to slide 9. This slide just shows you grade is administered 3 times a year. We're actually going to start our second administration within the next couple of days. As you may or may not know, Dibbles Next is also administered three times a year. We use that data, as I said, for diagnostic reasons and also to measure progress. Slide 10. In a nutshell, the 3 goals of the grant are, number 1, obviously to build a partnership with our pre-K providers so that we can strengthen that bond with them. That was paid handsomely for us in all of our kindergarten classrooms. Create and distribute a pre-K kindergarten transition plan. We already have one through Family Connections. We want to establish that with all of our partners, is to have a plan in place. Our goal is to try to have that up and running by year's end. And the bigger piece is having a local K-12 comprehensive literacy plan. We are right in the middle of getting that started. I'll talk to you just briefly about how that's going to go ahead and how we need the board's help with that. But it's something that we're really, I feel the state is moving ahead in all school districts. When we talk about comprehensive planning, and I kind of want to flip to that right now, also requires us to have a comprehensive literacy plan. Comprehensive planning is going to take the place of strategic planning. And I can report I'm very happy to say that with all the input we had over strategic planning with the state, we tried to streamline the process. They listened to us and came up with what is known as comprehensive planning. The nice thing is that it kind of dovetails nicely with what we're doing in KTO. But the one thing I'll be coming with you next month with is a request for the school board to appoint several stakeholders in the community. There'll be 2 parents, 2 community members, and 2 local business leaders to our comprehensive planning committee. And I'll have more information on that over the next month for you to consider. So you may want to start thinking about that just individually right now, about who might in fact be interested, and we'll certainly work with the board to put the word out because we want their input. Right now we're just getting that started. The comprehensive plan itself is not due until November 30th, 2013. And we've already started taking a look at data with our principals to get their feedback. The whole idea is to get a lot of feedback, to get a plan done, and then to take it out to the public for their input. And I know we've talked about doing that not only with that, but with our curriculum. That's all going to start to happen now that we have this, in place. We have the KTO up and running. We're now going to get the comprehensive plan up and running. So there also might be some of you that would like to be involved in that process, and you'll certainly be welcome to. So we want to have a pre-K plan. We want to have a K-12 plan. And finally, we have done this very well in Easton, and I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back, but I think I should. we have expanded our data team process, and I must tell you, over the past 3 years, despite the fact we've had a lot of reorganization in our school district, I have to hand it to our teachers and our principals for maintaining a dynamic data process where people are looking at data. The high school is to be commended with all the things that they've done with data and to try to meet the needs of our struggling students. They are probably one of the few high schools in Pennsylvania that has a process of response to instruction and intervention in place. It's growing every day, and obviously over time it'll be perfected. But what that means is this: that we take a look at testing data and we make our decisions on how to move ahead based upon those pieces of data. And that is what this grant is trying to do: is bring to the forefront school districts that maybe don't do that. So we have always done that. So that's a goal that we are just beginning to strengthen even more. So the Keystones to Opportunity grant for us is working. We have some things that we are trying to make it work better, but I am pleased to report to you that after our last visit, we were told verbally that we're doing a very good job. We'll have that in writing soon. At least I'm not on what I'm hoping. Are there any questions about the KTO grant that you'd like answered with regards to where we're at with it?
Steve, is there a rubric of some kind that the IU uses to score you, score us, the district, or how what feedback will you get from them so you know where to go?
That's
next?
a very good question, Jen, and I think what I am recalling she said is that there'd be a written report sent to us, which I'll try to share with the superintendent and obviously with the board right away. The rubric we had wasn't a rubric per se, but there were various questions that we had to answer, and it was really regarding what we do in our school district with data, which I can certainly provide. And I can provide that once we have that written evaluation. But I think they're still in their infancy with regards to how they're monitoring this. In fact, one of the comments we made during the visitation was, is there a way that we can talk to other school districts that are involved with doing this? Because we don't know everyone who is, and they actually have now something scheduled where we will kind of get together and share some of our activities. She thought it was a great idea. It was something that they hadn't considered. So it's still kind of in its infancy and it's still kind of blossoming, but I'll share that information, the moment it's made, available. In fact, I'll call and find out how soon we can get it, because I'm not sure at this point.
Well, I would just like to say, I know this was a difficult grant to receive. There were, as you can see, a lot of school districts have applied, pre-application, and many weren't encouraged to do anything beyond that. So the fact that Easton Area School District received this grant is really kudos to everybody who worked on it. And I know, Carolyn, getting everybody to the table, the preschool teachers, getting to get to the elementary schools and talk to the teachers and the principals there is really a big stride. So I couldn't be happier about this, and thank you for coming tonight. And thanks, Steve, for
Sure.
putting this together.
Are there any other
Anybody
questions
else?
about KTO? Sorry,
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I wanted to give you, I sent to you the timeline as we had submitted to you before, just so you had an update on where we were at. But I wanted to give you a verbal update that we're now beginning to get calls every day about Cyrus, which is fantastic. I'm sure you've seen our website, and I want to thank Ann for her help with that website, because she was working with me. It was like working with a madman in a laboratory. Okay, let's add this now. Let's add that. Let's try this. But I want to thank Ann publicly for putting up with me during that transition phase. And it looked good, and I said, just leave it go. It's working. So I want to tell you right now, we have at least a half dozen people who say they're committed to enrolling. They're actually disenrolling now. We have a meeting tomorrow. We had our first meeting last Tuesday. We have another one tomorrow night. Janet was there. That was our first meeting. It was attended by about 10 people. I don't know if you want to comment about some of your perceptions of things from that meeting.
Well, the people who came to the meeting, the parents who came, seemed to have their minds made up that they were going to enroll their students in our cyber school. One parent was homeschooling 4 children, and she couldn't do it anymore. It was simply too much for her, and she felt that VLN was, a really good option for students. Several other parents that I talked to, their children were going to other charter schools, and they just felt that the communication was lacking. And the representative from VLN did a very good job presenting all of the options, how the parents know what's happening, what the students have to do every day. It's available to them 24/7, but they do have to sign into homeroom every day at 10:30, and they have a homeroom teacher. She did a great job explaining it, and Steve had a few secretaries there, and parents went right back to the table at the end of the presentation and filled out the application. Like they were ready to go.
And I really appreciated Janet's presence there because, it really looked like we had a team in place. I mean, we do, but I think we gave a very unified presentation. As a result of that, and it's the rule of 200, where everyone left that meeting happy and satisfied, even though the one said, I'm not going to enroll now because I'm going to finish this semester out, but we're definitely coming in the fall. So I got her name, we have it on file, and we'll follow up with her too. But the key is that she left happy, and we had 2 other people call as a result of that parent. She said, we're not going to enroll, but she must have gone out and talked it up, and as a result, we had some people say, we heard it looks good, we saw your website. So I think we're going to see what I had said would happen. And we'll get the ball rolling, and eventually we're going to have more and more people come back, and then we will take a look. And I appreciated Dr. Moscaitis' view. We're going to start walking now, and before we start running, we want to make sure we have the next phase in place, and ultimately down the road we can start talking about hybrid learning. But we are walking now, and without supports. We have a meeting tomorrow before the meeting with Jamie Berenger from VLN to finalize all the enrollment and course outline procedures. We have, and I want to thank Alyssa O'Mealy and all of her help to try to get all of the pupil services pieces together. Dawn is set to go with any IEPs. We had one parent talk to us about, well, how are they going to service my IEP? I said, well, we're going to meet with our staff, and because she's not happy at all with how it's happening right now for her. So I'm very pleased to report that it seems that our startup for our cyber school has been very successful. You will have more updates and a more definitive enrollment account, for sure before even your next meeting. So I'll keep you updated on that. Are there any questions you have to date about the cyber school? I wanted to thank you publicly for getting me lined up with the Kiwanis. That was a great time.
Did you go?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
No question, but just a congratulations to you and all the staff here who have worked on getting this up. It's a lot of work, I know, but it's a great move that we've done in a fairly short time. So
yeah,
thank
we're
you
excited.
all.
Thank you. Yeah, we are excited to be part of this, and I think it will pay off. We have to start taking a look at our next step, start planning for that. But right now, we want to have a nice lift-off opening of our first semester. And I want to thank the board for their support in this effort. You're going to hear from me one more time, and then I can sit down, and I'm sure you're glad. The high school graduation venue, and obviously we have both of our principals here, and maybe it might be better for me to turn it over to one or both of them, so you don't hear my voice. But if we could get up the, I know we have a spreadsheet on the costs, and Mr. Cook made.
I had to stand up. Most comfortable chairs in this audience. As Steve mentioned, everything is ready for us to look at graduation. We have a tentative date. We just need your approval to sign the contract and move forward. And for the last 4 or 5 years, at least the last 3 years, as principal and running graduation since I was the 12th grade principal as well, we put together a spreadsheet, just looking at what the costs were for last year in comparison to what the costs were this year. Some of those costs in yellow are anticipated. Last year, we were probably $2,000 or $2,500 over. Under, rather. We budgeted around $2,500 more. Some of those costs you just don't know, particularly when you deal with police and labor. Sometimes those costs tend to heighten. This year, our tentative date, I'm not going to say it until it's approved, but it'll be on a Monday. And so, overtime and things of that nature should be okay. We also get an escort to move the kids there via busing. So if there are any questions, the rental fee, I believe it went. It actually decreased by about $100. I have no idea why that happened, but it's been pretty much the same for the last 3 or 4 years, within reason.
Can I just add, just so we're clear, last year we budgeted approximately, was it $32,000?
Right.
Was approved. Mike and Jeanette were able to bring that in just under $30,000, $29,700. So they are budgeting even less for this coming year than they had last year. But just so we're aware of that.
Any questions? Concerns?
Do you assume, Mike, that that's a 10% contingency built in there as well?
Yeah, we'll be under that. We'll be under. We definitely won't be under. I build it into contingency in the budget, Dr. Mosqueda. I don't think we're going to run into any issues at all in those areas.
Okay, so at this point, we're looking to move this forward to be approved at the next board meeting on the 29th without the date?
Please.
No, with the date.
With the date.
Yeah, the date's in the contract.
Okay.
But everyone listening at home needs to make sure it's approved at the board meeting. They'll see it. They'll see it on board docs.
Okay.
We'll have that motion.
And then I'll make sure the senior class gets the announcement so that the parents.
Okay.
All right, I think
They're
we're...
usually 6 months ahead of time. You have to work on those.
That's right. We get the tentative date in December, and like I said, we try to get it confirmed as quickly as possible so people can make arrangements.
Okay. I don't think we're going to have any problem getting that on the agenda for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, at this point, is there anyone in the audience who has any public comment to be heard on the academic committees? No, okay. All right, so to summarize, item A, we're going to move forward, send to the board for the next meeting on the 29th, using option 1 to begin with current 9th graders. No action needs to be taken on item B, C, and item D. We will move the graduation information forward on the 29th. And that concludes our academic committee for this evening. Thank you very much to everybody who presented. Carolyn, thank you so much for coming. Yes, thank you. Mrs. Allison.
I think I have that.
Yeah, that one? Okay.
Stephen, looks like you're up again first.
I'll be brief. How's that?
Please.
We actually said these things, and I'm trying to give you all the facts. As you know, we were accredited well, I shouldn't say we still are. We are technically still accredited a K-12 school district under accreditation for growth. If you recall, we made a move to consolidate that and to reduce that budget substantially, but to retain the accreditation feature with our high school 9 through 12. And we chose to go with the Excellence by Design model for that. During the time that we made that transition, we were still a K through 12 committee, and we had our committee working. And one thing they came up with, they felt our mission statement, while very well intended, was somewhat verbose, and it was difficult to remember. And honestly, folks, it is. I think it has some great things, but what happened was from our committee, and this was a committee that was made up of principals, teachers, it was all voluntary, nothing, no one was paid to be on this committee. Like in prior years, everyone seemed to be paid for that. These people came out voluntarily. And we had quite a few meetings, and they came up with, and I'm here this evening to share this with you, and certainly if you can't move it on, I understand it, but I wanted to publicly discuss that they felt that to try to simplify the mission statement to what I have before you this evening, which is the Easton Area School District will develop its students into responsible citizens and lifelong learners by providing an academically challenging 21st century curriculum and a safe school environment, was a little easier to understand and to actually remember than what we currently have. The other thing they wanted to change was the shared value statement, with just a couple words there, still reflecting that we are a diverse school district. So what we're really saying is, do we have your permission to do that? Is there a cost to doing this? There's a cost if we plan to replace all the signs, which is really not in our, just the main things on our website, and that our letterhead is all generated by computer. So there's very little cost, I think, involved with this. And I said that even with the budget we have for Excellence by Design, that any of those cursory costs would be covered through that. That you would at least consider maybe a change of our statement to make it simple. And we're only coming to you right now because we have our middle states evaluation in March at the grades 9 through 12 high school building. So I leave it to you right now to discuss this and vet it out as you feel appropriate, and we'll certainly do whatever the board thinks we should, which may be just leave it alone. And we're fine with that if that's also what you feel.
Comments?
My comment would be, everybody could, if we have 12 people in a room, everybody could say they want something a little different. Okay? Because none of us here would say that everything is perfect, or we like everything word for word. But it is complete. I don't see anything that's really wrong with what we have. And to go through the cost of changing our signs and the letterhead is nothing. But I mean, because a few people want a few words changed, I don't see it being necessary to do that, because our statement has been valid, it's been accepted by the state, and now because a few people want this word and that word changed, we're going to now change everything. The majority of people haven't spoken against it. So I think, personally, my opinion is, I think it's acceptable the way it is, and it states our true philosophy. And a few words isn't going to make it any different.
Other comments?
I've got a bit of a different approach to that topic. I think we should look at revising it and changing it. A mission statement should be something that's easy to remember, something a few words, but something that's dynamic enough to leave that impression that this is what this building is all about. This is what this district is all about. This is what this community is about. When I actually took a course on writing mission statements and things like that, and one of the first things they taught us was to keep it under 10 words. That might be a little more than 10 words, but not much. I think it's acceptable. I like it. I like it.
I would say that if the people who are on this committee have brought this to your attention and would like to change it, I would honor that, their request to do
Well, it is up to the board. I mean, it is part of the board policy, and I respect anybody's opinion on this. Whether it's changed or not is not going to be a significant event. But I like that's exactly what they were saying to me, and I said, hey, I'm not saying you're wrong. I think the board should hear this and how you feel. And keep in mind, this wasn't a committee of just a couple people. I mean, this was a committee that represented a lot of people who were there. But I respect what anybody has to feel about this. There are people who felt it was fine just the way it was. Sometimes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Works, but I wanted to bring this to you to at least consider.
Steve, it's not out of line with anything with the state or anything. It's been accepted.
I don't even think the state requires us to have a mission statement, but I mean, we
Well,
do with our strategic
but,
plan.
Middle States does.
Yeah, right. And that's why we're here.
Right,
Just-
and Middle States did approve that after.
Yeah, they did.
They did approve the mission statement at the last Middle States evaluation. So, I mean, that's what I'm going on, and, you know, maybe we should, if we're gonna change it, let's wait to the next Middle States. I think we're not that, 5 years away now, or?
Well, no, we'll have a Middle States visitation in March, and then that will be reaccredited for 7 years, provided
Okay,
follow-up.
so we're not, you know, if they have any comments, and then wait and see, and then
Okay.
maybe change it then.
Certainly do that.
You know, because they could say, well, let's move it forward, maybe you should make some changes now, and so forth. But it was accepted by Middle States,
It was,
so.
yes.
Okay, we have another.
Just a brief comment. I don't think it makes hill of beans worth a difference what you have existing or the new one. I doubt either one is material for a commercial anytime soon that you'll hear on TV. So if I don't know that people are going to memorize either one, but if people who work here feel strongly that they want to better reflect what they do, I'm good with it. If you really want something that people are going to remember, you have to keep it short, like prepare for life, or preparation for life, something like that.
Well, what we could do is this. The committee came up with this. It was a K-12 committee. We have passed this on to the high school, and we could certainly let the high schools committee now take a look at it. If they feel that they want to adopt that change specifically because they're now going to be accredited, we could always come back here. But I like your idea, too. If Middle States has any problem with it, they can always put that in their comments and then revisit it. But I felt it was incumbent upon me, since I headed up those committees, to at least bring this to you to consider. And I, agree with you. It's much more what's happening in our classrooms rather than what's in a mission statement that matters. But the whole concept of a mission statement is to try to reflect what we're doing in that classroom setting. So I wanted to bring this to you this evening.
Any other comments?
Certainly table this.
Any other comments? Right. Let's go.
It's
Hayes.
It wasn't coming.
What's his name?
Mr. Pringle, I agree with Dr. Muscanis, also with Mr. Vandenberg. I'd like to see if we move it and we'll just take a vote on it next week. But before, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'd like to hear the opinion of our leader, our superintendent, and see her feeling on the mission statement.
When we were doing our accreditation before, we had looked at other school districts and tried to look at something very short, and educating for life's journey was certainly something that was short. It was to the point. So on that I believe in being very concise, that people can always remember what our purpose is. So.
And that became our vision statement.
It
And
did.
that is an excellent one.
There's a difference between a mission and a vision. You could have both.
Yeah.
Hallucination.
It's one of those things, again, I agree with you. I like that as even a mission statement, but some of our people felt it needed to be a little more involved. And I think Middle States would not.
I don't think Middle States would accept
When you look at
this
Middle States,
4 years.
when you look at Middle States wants community involvement.
Yes.
This comes from a community involvement. The shorter the better. Thank you.
That's great. And plus, I'm still trying to learn your alma mater, so I think let's keep this short.
Thanks,
Okay,
Dave.
thank you.
I got the first two right. I have to learn the first two.
Good evening. On the agenda this evening is Policy 201, Admission of Students. This policy, it currently includes a clause stipulating the allowance of early admission testing for the 2012-2013 school year. It's my recommendation that we amend the policy with just a simple language change at this point to reflect early admission testing for the 2013-2014 school year. So it's just a very minor change to the current policy. Ultimately, it is the recommendation of the school district and of the administration and legal counsel to look at discontinuing early admission testing in the future. I think to be mindful of the time of year that we are in right now and parents preparing for pre-K or kindergarten options for their children for next school year, I think to be mindful of that, we should amend the policy with the allowance of early admission testing for next school year, with the date of, I believe, April 12th, that they have to have it in writing to me, to my office, and then looking at a subsequent policy revision in May or June in order to discontinue early admission testing moving forward from that point. So that is the direction that the administration does ultimately recommend, but just being mindful of the time of year that we're in right now, this simple language change has been recommended this evening.
Alyssa, doesn't this fall in line with last year? Because wasn't that the start of the phase out of this?
It does. I had asked Joan Schaefer to pull the minutes from last year, so I did review those, and that is what goes in line with my ultimate recommendation. I just think that at the time of year that we're in, I want to be mindful of both what legal counsel is recommending, what the administration is recommending, but then also parents being prepared for next school year for their children who they may be considering for the clause that's currently in our policy.
Questions?
Listen, let me ask you one question.
Sir?
What is the benefit of discontinuing early admission testing?
I think that was the recommendation last year. As I look at minutes from last year, that was the recommendation from our legal counsel. And Erin, sure.
Yeah, there was new case law that came out last year, and I don't know who asked the question, I'm sorry. There was new case law that came out last year that held that the districts were responsible for paying for students to attend charter schools if the districts, for students who were eligible for early admission, if the districts themselves offered early admission. So there was a discussion last year about just eliminating all early admission testing all across the board, because otherwise if we offer it as a district, you would be obligated to either pay for those charter schools to attend or even possibly pay for early admission evaluations and things like that. So it really was a financial determination based on a decision that happened last school.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Use of vehicles.
Good evening, everyone. Before you is policy 701.1, use of vehicles by employees. In developing this policy, the following individuals had input: Mike Simonetta, Tim Case, Ron Heckman, Ron Pacioli, Jimmy Kuprivzak, and Aaron was consulted as well. I'm not going to read the whole policy word for word, but it is brand new. It's not a revision. But I'm going to go through certain sections that I'll highlight for you that I feel are important. And then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end. The very first paragraph, the purpose, item 1, these guidelines are to be followed in all instances where students are being transported by district employees or district-owned motor vehicles are being utilized, or privately owned vehicles are being used for district business, including where mileage reimbursement is being utilized. So this doesn't reflect transportation or bus drivers. It's all employees, our maintenance, custodial maintenance. It's myself as I put in for mileage reimbursement. Every other administrator does. A lot of teachers do when they have to travel to and fro during the course of the day. This policy covers a wide range of employees. All right. If we go down to under use of vehicles, number 3, guidelines, item 2, second paragraph. The employee must have a valid operator's license issued within the United States. The district will obtain a current driver motor vehicle record for all drivers, and that's something new for us.
John, do you mind if I go back to the first point?
I'd rather you hold your questions for the end, then I'll be happy to answer them at the end. The motor vehicle record will be examined to ensure the operator's license is current, valid, and the driving record is acceptable. Number 3, employees with Type A violation within the last 3 years are not permitted to drive district-owned vehicles or to transport students under any circumstances. Any employee who receives a Type A violation shall be immediately prohibited from operating district vehicles. And then down below, there's not an exhaustive list of 14 Type A violations. Right, and then below that, I want to point out under number 4, there's a Type B violation, which basically is generally phrased to say includes any other moving violation that is not considered a Type A violation. And the sentence above that, number 4, says employees with 3 or more Type B violations in the last 12 months are not permitted to drive district-owned vehicles or transport students under any circumstances. Right, as we go down to number 5, third paragraph, the supervisor of facilities operations will control the scheduling of all maintenance vehicles, and that will be Tim Case. And the supervisor and or manager of transportation will control the scheduling of all student transportation vehicles, and obviously that's Ron Heckman and Ron Pacioli. Right? We can go on to the next page, under safety, paragraph 4. The use of personal handheld cellular phones or other electronic devices for phone calls, email, texting, or other purposes while operating a district motor vehicle is strictly prohibited. Emergency calls may be made only after the driver has pulled off the roadway and has placed the vehicle in park in a safe location. Right, and that's an important item to note. Right, and the last page, and then I can answer questions. Under about halfway down, under use of personal vehicles to transport students, from time to time we do have coaches and others transporting students to different contests. The use of personal vehicles by school district employees to transport students to or from district-sponsored events is prohibited unless all the following conditions are met. And item 1 says prior approval of a district building principal or the athletics director is secured in writing. And 2, prior approval by the parent, guardian, or emergency contact is secured in writing. And then finally, at the bottom, consequences for policy violation. The last line, such failure may also result in disciplinary actions up to and including termination of employment. So, in a nutshell, I didn't know any other real good way to go through that policy with you. It is brand new. I can tell you I did a lot of research on this. There really aren't a lot of other local districts that have a similar policy. There's not a lot of examples to go from that.
Back to that first paragraph, where you say privately owned vehicles used for district business, including where mileage reimbursement is being utilized. So that implies that it's for both mileage reimbursement and non-mileage reimbursement? Or is it intended for when it is only mileage reimbursement?
Okay, so privately owned vehicles are being used for district business, including where mileage reimbursement is being utilized.
Would there be a case where they're not?
I don't believe so. Standing here, I can't think of that.
So it's unclear as it's written, and how do you know that they're going to actually apply for mileage reimbursement until later?
Well, that's I don't think the way the policy I read it, you have to apply for reimbursement to fall under this policy because it says if you use your own vehicle, then you're covered under this policy.
If I can answer that as well, I think that the language is crafted so that it doesn't exclude people who they can't opt out of it just by not getting mileage reimbursement. So it's intended, and we do anticipate that almost everybody doing this will get mileage reimbursement, but you can't opt out of the policy just by not seeking your mileage. So we want to cover everybody, and this language does that.
Aaron, question for you then on that. Take it a step further. John's driving from building A to building B, okay? And for whatever reason, he's using his cell phone, but it's his private vehicle. Now that violates the policy, right?
Yes. That's how I read it.
I'm just wondering if that isn't a concern.
Well, I don't know that just transporting yourself from one place to another, I don't know that that would be necessarily district business, but that's something you might want to clarify. I mean, under the law, driving to and from work wouldn't fall under this policy. If you're driving a student from point A to point B, it certainly would.
But under the law, you're not supposed to use your cell phone while you're driving, correct?
No.
For any reason.
No.
Right, but we wouldn't be, this policy would not be addressing that. That would be illegal issue separate from outside.
That's not the law in
I thought you
Pennsylvania.
had to be hands-free.
No.
I think it depends on where you are in Pennsylvania. Some places do.
In some municipalities. The other thing is that it's not uncommon for a teacher, or I know I did co-op, I counted my own miles and wrote them off on my own tax returns because I needed the write-off. So, I mean, it was, I didn't turn it in. I reported it. I let the school know that I was doing it, but I wrote it off on my own tax returns, and it was in my own car. So I don't know how much that law would affect me. If, like I say, I had no student with me. With the student, then I'm taking the risk of then I'm definitely on, school business, because I have another student with me. But even though if I'm on school business, I'm by myself in my own car, like Bob is saying, and I don't turn in those miles, nobody could force me to do that.
I'd suggest you just to close it up quickly, unless somebody has a problem. I think this ought to go back for further review and everything.
I have some questions. Something I'd like to see added. Under use of vehicle, number 1, it talks about the MVR checks, driver license checks. When I write workers' comp policies for client businesses, I won't even write them unless they are checking MVR reports and driver's license, depending on the size of the company, every 6 months to every year. So the way it reads here, you're going to check it, you'll have clearance. Well, if their license gets suspended 3 months down the road, we don't pull it again, we don't know. Something happens while they're driving on a suspended license, it comes back on us, we're liable. So I'd like to see a 6-month or a year of us pooling MVR records and driver's license reports, to be able to continue driving for us in any capacity.
Any other comments along those lines? Or again, it'll go back and we will see this again.
Just one quick one, because most companies are discouraging the use of private vehicles, and that's been over 10 years ago. And I would say I'd like to see that written into the policy as well. When necessary, it's understood, but if you have a choice, use a rental or use a district vehicle.
I agree with the thought of Mr. Fennerbone that these driver records should be checked on a regular basis. I guess my question or my comment would be, how cumbersome would it be to check the record every time? Is that I'm not familiar with checking vehicle records. It's something that, as in when you write a request to use a district vehicle, we run your record and we say, can you use this vehicle at this time?
I mean, every time you run it, you got to pay for it. So usually, I mean, to secure yourself with your insurance company and be covered, it's usually every 6 months to a year that you have to make sure you're reviewing it. But every time you run it, they have to pay to run it.
I think personally, I think if it was done once a year, or if there was a problem that was checked, I think, but to, Aaron, to do it every time would be a cost and very timely to the district.
It would be very timely and it would be very costly. But let's take into consideration that I can get myself clear today to drive a vehicle. Tomorrow I can get a DUI. I'm clear for a whole year on the district level.
Under Act 24, you're required to report that offense to me.
Okay. Maybe not a DUI. Maybe I'll,
Within 72?
at-fault accident, whatever's considered a Type A violation. If you get where I'm going.
Yes.
With that, that's a whole year where that would be something that's
We'll look at that. That's a good point. We'll take that.
I mean, the 6 months. I mean, every time you need a trip, you'd have to hire like another department. You know what I mean? To do that every time somebody needs it. But I think 6 months, depending on how many people we actually have, 6 months would be good, a year at the most.
John, what policy is that written in that employees have to report a violation?
Well, it's per the law. It was Act 24, and then it was revised under Act 82. And I can't recall the number.
But we have policy.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I think we put it in our employment policy. didn't
You
we?
have it in all of your employment policies.
Yeah, we ordered a whole bunch of them last year at
Yeah.
one time for that whole statute. So, are there any other comments on this one, on this subject?
Just real quickly, do we have, if a driver does have a violation, do we have in here that they have 24, 48 hours to report it to us?
You're saying 72.
72?
Yeah.
I think number 5, does that cover it?
Those are-
It talks
Yeah,
about
there it
notice
is, okay.
within 48 hours of a citation. Page 2 of 4, item 5.
Any other comments?
That would be work.
And I just have one clarification. Is it the consensus of the committee then that the district does pursue the no personally owned vehicle? Is that?
Well, I don't know if this is what Dr. Mosaitis was referring to, if people go like, this item came up on a conference or something like that. But I know, like, I'm not going to rent a car to drive to the middle school. I'm going to use my own vehicle.
It's exactly the case I was thinking of.
Right. So you're some language to talk about conferences and that kind of thing.
Any other comments? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask if there's any comments from the public on the agenda items we just discussed.
Just real quick to touch on what John just said.
Name and address, please.
Helen Jones, I live in Palmer Township. I'm going to talk on behalf of bus drivers, actually. In our handbook, we actually have this all taken care of, where there will be no electronic devices. The only electronic devices that are at your ear are prescribed. Okay, and Maria, which is no longer here, myself, we went to great lengths to really, secure all of this to make sure that nobody did use electronic, items. And as far as the CDL, we have to report. Okay, if we have a DUI or something like that, we have no choice but to report. Okay, so, as far as running the license all the time, I don't think that's feasible. Personally, I don't think that's feasible because we do have to report. And I'm not sure what John was talking about with the offenses A and B.
This doesn't apply to bus drivers.
Well, he said buses. He certainly did say it. Okay, so. He said buses.
Well, Helen, you're special.
I know that, but just so you know, though, we do have things in place with or without this policy, and as far as the union goes, we back it 100%, to be on the safe side.
But it sounds like it's going to go back for review.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else this evening on those topics? Yes. Drew?
Thank you, Mr. President. 6 months of Braddock Street, Easton. I get nervous when people break zeal, write great policies, and I'm sure they then go to gather dust. And then the problem becomes, what happens when you fail to enforce them? Let me give you a very sad example. We did very covert background checks on incoming employees where I work. And we proceeded to give somebody a company car, and we went down the road, and he wiped out several little old ladies. And upon double checking with some sources that I had, we literally employed the CIA Alumni Club. And they said, Mr. Anderson, you don't understand. We gave you a full dossier on his problems. And somebody in the organization had overlooked them at a higher level. And council never found them. Now, I'm not saying that's commonplace. But when people write fancy regulations that say, thou shalt never drive a company vehicle unless you meet criteria A, B, C, D, and F, and nobody ever checks it 5 years from now, and somebody goes down the road and causes a problem, then's when your attorney gets a little lawsuit that says, hey, you guys were negligent. You knew Drew Anderson wasn't supposed to be behind the wheel. He's had 3 medical problems in the last 5 years, and how come you didn't know it? So I think you want to double check with a devil's advocate approach before you write all these rules, thou cannot, thou shall not, because when somebody forgets is when you're going to get hurt. And I'm not trying to say don't be safe, but I'm reminded of a scene in the movie where the Japanese planes are coming in and somebody's sitting there going through the checkout list as whether they can open up the weapons locker or not. You want to get something done, you need to get it done, and not go through a procedures manual. I don't know the balance, but I'm hearing a sense of perfection that is only good on the adoption process unless you've got infinite amount of money to hire a bunch of bureaucrats to review it weekly to keep it up to date. And nobody does that kind of stuff. You know, there's probably some rules and regulations written about weapons procedures in World War I that are still technically enforced. And there are certainly ones around the school district. We all know about the policy about communications devices. The first time it is enforced will be, the next time it's enforced will be the very first time it's enforced. So I appreciate hearing the good intentions, but please don't write stuff you don't have enough staff to enforce. You can't afford to enforce some of this stuff.
Thank you. Is there anyone else this evening on the agenda items? Seeing none, quick summary is we're going to move 101 and 201 onto the board meeting for next week. Athletics.
Thank you. We were very, we didn't have pretty much anything for athletics, so I wanted to take a couple minutes and just speak about the Easton High School boys baseball and basketball teams during the holidays. Our basketball team, which went out and helped with Angel 34 during the holidays. Angel 34, for anyone that doesn't know, is a foundation that supports children and their families during their battle with childhood cancer. So our team went out, spent time with the kids that were able to have visitors, and just really brighten up their day with some of the Easton basketball players. In addition, our basketball players volunteered for Pizza with Santa at Paxton Oaks Elementary School, which had hundreds of people come with their families. They got to meet Santa with the help of the city and BDC, and our basketball team again helped with that. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Also, the boys baseball team, as we all know, or we should know, they sell Christmas trees. That's one of the ways they fundraise for their program. About a couple years ago, Coach Edson Luduca decided to buy an extra 7 Christmas trees and give them to people who couldn't afford them. And that's what they did. Last year was my first year involved, and then again this past year. And we gave away 40 Christmas trees this year, and about 40 last year, and about 40 again this year. We ran out of Christmas trees last year to give away, and the fire department of Easton volunteered and donated one. Helen Jones was helping out. So our coach, Rosnick, and some of the boys came out today, and they made a short video that we're going to just see. It's a great time, and maybe some more people would like to come out next year.
The assistant baseball coach here at Easton. We've been doing this for 5 years. We're donating trees to needy families. We got the idea when I was a Santa Claus at Cheston Elementary School, finding out that so many kids did not have the things they needed at Christmas time. Simple things like a Christmas tree, decorations, toys. So we decided as a baseball program that since we were lucky and the community backed us all the time, come out and support us for games and root us on, that this is something that we could give back to the community. So we decided to take donations of Christmas trees and take them to needy families. What we've come to find out is we started with 8 trees. Coach LaDuca, myself, and a few of the other coaches threw money in. We delivered 8 trees the first year, to now we're up to 30-some trees. So it's really grown, and we found out that a lot of our kids and a lot of our players now have a different feeling of what Christmas is really all about. It's not about presents. It's not about how much they get. It's now about giving, and it's about the season, and it's about making families happy. And that's the best part of this whole thing, is that when we go around and we're able to go into people's houses, we're able to really see we make a difference in their lives. So it's a way for us to just give back a little bit.
My favorite part of this is just getting to see the kids and the whole family's happy, and knowing that we make a difference in their lives, and that it really means something to them.
Just knowing that you're making someone's Christmas and you're making them very happy.
My favorite part of this is helping the community, because they help us with their support for coming to our games. So it's good to give back and support them.
Giving back to the community and seeing the smiles on everybody's face.
Giving back to the community and giving nice Christmas to the less fortunate families that we have.
This is a good experience for me since I'm so young, and I get to see kids older than me doing things I'll be doing in the future, and I'm just glad that I'm able to do things for people that are my age and don't always get things that they get that I get, so I'm just happy to contribute to something special.
I just wanted to add, I forgot at the beginning, a lot of those trees have been donated from the staff members, teachers, administrators, different things who bought trees and then donated them for the team to take out the families and things. So it was a great program. Thanks, guys, in the back. Our basketball teams are playing tonight, so no one from the basketball team can show up. So, do I have any public to be heard on the athletic agenda item?
No, but I have a comment. My wife does go to the football games and wrestling games quite regularly. Okay, and I used to go up until about 5 years ago. I will tell you, and being a former member of this board, she has noticed a drop-off in senior citizens going to the games. And in some cases, some that went relentlessly. She called up and she spoke to them, and some that spoke to her were places where we have been, where she has been. And, the raising the amount for senior citizens we thought would bring us in more money. I think it was a major drop-off in attendance, number one. And you could see that in the wrestling matches this past week with Parkland. There was hardly anyone there, any senior citizens there. And also, I keep on bringing this up year after year, and nothing is done about this, is that we need at least one railing on each side for the senior citizens in the reserved seat section of our football Cunningham Stadium.
We could definitely address that, but I don't believe tonight's the time.
Well, I do want to bring it up because we keep on.
And I'll make sure we have it on the agenda when it could be brought up. Also, I talked to Mr. Poprivsak. We are going to be getting a report soon that shows ticket sales, how much money we generated from the sporting, seniors and different things. So then we'll have a better idea.
Right.
We increased RCN from $100 to $5, and they're at our wrestling matches. They're at our football games. So we're increasing revenue, but we'll get that on another agenda, and then we can discuss it.
Well, I just like to finish, though.
Well, I'd rather you wait for the next one because we have to follow policy, and it's not on this agenda.
Well, you're saying anything about sports.
No, that's not what I said. I said about agenda items on athletics.
Yeah, but as a board member, you don't have to follow the agenda as much as the public does. I agree. I mean, we have a little bit more rights. The public has a right to speak. So do we have a right to speak?
Absolutely, but during athletic committee, and grounds, as long as I'm chair, we're going to follow the rules.
Right.
So I appreciate if you just follow the rules for us, but I will make sure we address it so you can tell us about it.
But the railing is definitely something that has to be addressed.
All right.
Because it's stopping senior citizens from going.
Do we have any public comment on it? Athletics agenda item? All right, chair summary is none, thank you. And we're gonna move to buildings and grounds.
Keep on going.
All right. We're gonna start with the energy savings plan. If you remember, I brought this plan up July, maybe June or July at the high school. What it is there's company, about 40 companies in PA. I'm just gonna go over it briefly. If you guys have questions that you don't remember, I will definitely answer those. There's about 40 companies that the state of Pennsylvania has vetted that has said they have strong enough balance sheets, reputable company that can guarantee the savings. What they're guaranteeing is if we float a bond to upgrade all of our energy things, from toilets to boilers to lights to windows, roofs, everything, they have to guarantee that the percentage saved will pay off our bond payment. So we're getting the savings and we're paying off a bond should we go that way. Anything above the bond comes to us and we could put it back in our buildings and grounds budget. It's something that I brought up in June. I've been working with, as I said I would, with Mr. Simonetta, President Fain, who's also the Vice Chair of Buildings and Grounds, and also our engineering firm. And we've been meeting and hashing some things out. Where I'm at today is myself, Mr. Fainel, Mr. Simonetta, and our engineering firm are ready to move forward with the plan. What we're looking to do, and I have a timeline of what the plan would look like. Board action at the end of next week would authorize Dewey to assemble summary scope, including building descriptions, potential projects, and energy. Basically, it's almost like putting together RFPs. Those RFPs will only go out to those companies that have been vetted by the state and are able to guarantee the savings. And then as you'll see, different steps. It's a 34-week process. Once we start with the RFPs, it does not mean we can't stop. If one of the companies that we pick come back and we just, as a group, do not feel the savings are there and we don't want to move forward, we can pull the plug and walk away from it. So, that's where we're at now. Do anybody have, I don't want to, does anybody should do it? Does anybody have questions? I don't want to bombard you with a whole bunch of things I've already talked about, but if you guys have questions that you don't remember, I'd rather do it that way and answer them.
I'd just like to say the energy program, and I think our other two members of the board at CIT has paid off for CIT. And you haven't got up there, if you go in back of the building, you can see the whole scheme of solar panels and stuff. And it's paying off for CIT. There's no reason it shouldn't pay off for us. It's not solving all their energy, but it's paying for a substantial part of it.
Well, we're not doing solar panels.
Right, but I understand that. But I'm saying alternative energy is something we have to look at.
Well, I think with CIT picked a good, from my research over the last year, CIT picked a good time to get into it. They were
grant money was available.
There was grant. That's what I'm
going.
That
grant money is not available.
There's no grant money for solar panels or anything of that nature. Plus, if that does come back around in the future, we reap more benefits from solar panels after we do all our upgrades to our buildings, if we choose to do that. But right now, solar panels are not being erected like they were because the grant money and things are not available. Any other questions?
One question.
Yes.
It's a very timely program always, but I'd be interested, looks like with investment advisors, how do the individual companies make their money? And being able to compare, because they're not doing it for free.
Absolutely. The individual companies are going to come, they're going to give us a price. Whatever they're guaranteeing our savings, they're making more, you know what I mean, on the cost. So they're only guaranteeing what, almost is left. But their guarantee has to meet or exceed the bond payment. And then above that will also come to us. But they will set their rates in, and then they work with once Dewey, our engineering firm, gets involved, they do the RFPs. Once we pick a company, the company will go out then get the contractors and get the different things, work with them. They
Okay,
can't.
that sounds great. I'd like to see the cash flow from year one all the way through, because I think you want to know how much
Absolutely.
up front.
Unfortunately, you can't see the cash flow until you get down
Right.
into the, and that's why we're doing that. And again, if we decide that it's not a good enough savings, we can always pull the plug.
Right.
At that time.
And Henry,
Yes.
based on your engineering on this energy savings project, you would update us on people who are looking to support us and contract with us? That would be part of your responsibility to back us, update us?
That's correct, yes. We would be in an advisory role in this case. We would help write the invitation to the approved companies, the 40 approved companies. Once they express an interest, we'll send out the RFP. It gets narrowed down to 3 companies that would actually submit, a full plan for the whole program. And then at that point, we would help them with specifications and all that kind of stuff. We wouldn't have an active role doing that. They would do that again, just an advisory role.
Okay. And you would upgrade us on that?
Absolutely.
We would use Dewey as advisory, myself,
Yes.
Mr. Simonetta, and Bob Bailey will also be going through and looking at
There's also, as you get through the project, an accounting of the savings to verify that what was guaranteed is making payments for.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Pinnabone, is there a cost involved to have Dewey Engineering assemble the summary scope, including building descriptions, potential projects, and energy data?
On the first one, developing the RFP that will be done as part of the retainer. When we get down to the reviewing and analyzing, that will be a hourly rate. Yes.
Yeah, when we come back, we will have those numbers. One thing that took us so long to bring it back, working with Dewey, there were fees in there, that they had, and looking at it, we didn't want to go with certain fees. So we sat with Dewey, myself, and Bob, and we hashed some things out, what we wanted to pay for what we didn't, what we thought we could get without paying, and things of that nature. And it worked out very well to take our costs substantially low for the help of Dewey.
I think the biggest part, just for clarification, that duplication of services. Originally, we looked at Dewey Engineering doing the audit of the energy of the buildings. Once you get to the ESCO companies, they're not going to go just based on our engineers' numbers or our numbers. They're going to have to do their own audit. And if we don't go, that final company that we authorized, we have to pay for their time doing that audit. So in connection with Dewey, we said do the RFP, and they agreed, and the final company that we hire will do their own audit because their fees and their estimates will be based on their numbers. And not arguing back and forth on what we provide to them. And that's why we're at that stage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right. We're going to move to letter C. No, we're not. Letter B, UGI service agreement. Mr. Simonetta.
We are currently under an agreement with Compass Energy. It's a consortium for providing our natural gas. There's 2 components, the commodity and the basis price. When this agreement was done a couple of years back, the board only chose to go at the commodity level. This agreement is up at the end of the school year for the commodity. We are following, may get confusing, and please if you have questions, the basis cost, which is very minor in our gas purchase, fluctuates with the market. We're not in any consortium with that. What I'd like to recommend, and we've met with Compass Energy, Mr. Fano and Mr. Pinnabone, with Dewey, met with Compass, alerted us that the contract is coming up at the end of this year. There was a 3-year agreement, by the way, that at this stage, it would benefit us to lock in a basis rate now, because it's lower than what the current market rate is. And then at the end of this winter season, we would come back with their estimates on the commodity rate for a future agreement. So what the recommendation is to lock in this basis rate, which we can do now. We don't have to wait till the end of the agreement because, as I said, we don't have an agreement on the basis with them. So we lock in the basis rate now, and then we'll coincide that with the best commodity rate at the end of the school year. And I will tell you the current commodity rate that we are locked into, because we signed 3 years ago, is much higher than the current value of the current cost of the commodity now. Again, at that time, it was a good move. That was 3 years ago. Moving forward, we would not recommend a 3-year contract. We would like to look at this at most 2 years, maybe a year and a half at a time.
I have to add something on there. I think one key out of this ends up being also, it's not a matter necessarily of approving the contract that evening. It's a matter that we're actually authorizing Mike to be able to sign a contract. Because when you sit down with those companies, they're striking a price as of basically that 12-hour or 8-hour period. And so if he doesn't meet with them for 2 days, something from Wednesday to Friday could change, or Tuesday to Thursday. And so when he sits with it, the authorization is that he has the authorization to strike the price at that point in time, based on what his recommendation is. And then he can update us afterwards.
Right. And much like we did with the bond refinance on the Del Val bonds last year, we came and we hit it right on, and we got a good number based on our consultants. And this will be the same scenario.
Any questions for Mike regarding that?
I know the IU has a consortium for fuel prices, or fuel per. Do they have similar for natural gas?
I think the IU is part of it. It's not a consortium where all the districts go with the IU, but this company has many districts that contract separately with the company. I believe the IU is included. I know Bethlehem is included. A lot of the bigger districts. And we are in that consortium with the IU.
The IU does not have it's not similar to the fuel. It doesn't have a similar. I mean, Mike might be right about them using it, but it's not the same kind of.
Right. You're doing it as individuals.
Right.
Any other questions for Mike? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to letter C, buildings security update.
Okay. I just was asked to talk to the board and publicly about our building security, and basically in light of current events, kind of refresh the board's memory on where we are, what we talked about over the last 6 months, and what we're doing moving forward. And currently, as we know, we have security and a combination of security and police personnel at the high school and the middle school. For this school year, the security personnel at the elementary levels were reduced and taken out of the budget. With that implementation, obviously we have to do more vigilance on locking the doors, change our procedures for access to the buildings, and so on. So the doors, as they should be, are locked all the times. Access is now granted after a visitor is identified by office personnel. Visitors must report to the main office before they go anywhere else in the building. And all doors, other exterior doors, are locked and constantly checked throughout the day to make sure they're secure. One thing that we have done, and we continue to do, is monthly safety meetings. And we have them at the district level and individual buildings as well. Over the last month or two, and in light of what occurred last month, we've had a lot more presence of the local police, and I must say, just stop for a second, the local police, the principals, the staff. I mean, we have to thank everybody because everybody has been on their guard and are becoming more vigilant or around. The police have been great in coming to all the buildings, all 3 municipalities. Been a presence in our district building, in the buildings, and riding around the buildings and being seen. I will also tell you that Hopefully, we're all going to be able to coordinate our schedules for next week, but we have a meeting scheduled with all the local police chiefs, and we're going to talk with Dave Seen, what we're doing, and then after we meet in the office, we're going to visit the buildings, each of the buildings together, and just talk about everything going on. But I can't say enough how much support the staff and the building level administrators have been in providing input, continuing their diligence in making sure that the building is as safe as possible. And again, we all know that nothing is guaranteed, but we have stepped up. And along those lines, the other reinforcement of the visitation procedures with building staff, obviously we have to remind everybody to continue reminding them to make sure we know who's in the building, what they're there for, and when they're going. The other thing we've been doing more so is monitoring the access to the building and the purpose for it from outside. We are checking the intercom systems, the cameras, making sure they're functioning at all times, and if not, our company is called immediately. And we're also, as much as we can, staying in the building as opposed to being out to meetings more. We want to make sure that the administrators and staff are in the buildings as much as possible with very few meetings going on. I want to remind you, back in the summer when we were talking about the budget and the cuts, I presented 3 options for reaction or a fix to the security and to the reduction of staff. One of them was to add additional keypads at the elementary schools and other schools where needed, because we wanted to make sure that the buildings, all doors are locked and only certain doors have access. But in doing that, with people going up to phys ed and out the back doors at other schools, we know we had to add some keypads. That was the least expensive of the 3 options, and we have completed that. Keypads were installed where required by the building principals. I will tell you, they have now asked for additional keypads, and we are going to make that happen. Another option we brought to your attention was a district-wide swipe access, as opposed to individual, this key is for this building, this card is for that building, but a district-wide access program. And the price estimate back then was about $160,000. The third option we brought, which was more costly, was basically a construction or a renovation to all existing buildings, with the exception of the middle school campus and the Shawnee building, what we call the man traps, which is entering a door and not begun and into a holding area, if you will, but able to get access to the rest of the building without reporting in, being seen, signing in, and so on. And that's going to obviously be construction in all those other buildings. That estimate was around $400,000 to $450,000. Other things that we're doing moving forward that are not that we're just going to do as part of the request from principals and local law enforcement and police suggestions were labeling, complete the labeling identification of classrooms inside and out. Some buildings are identified, some are not. We're going to finish that project. We are reviewing and revising where appropriate lockdown and evacuation procedures. We are providing additional radios for staff throughout the building, especially in the elementary level. That was a request. We will be looking to, again, with local law enforcement personnel, an independent study of our whole program. We're going to look to get estimates for that. We're also going to look at certain areas, identified areas, for additional camera installation. We are refreshing the crisis training for all staff. Another suggestion was some sort of panic alarm on all the exterior doors that should not be used during the day. There's other things that have come up through suggestions, through meetings with staff that are a little more confidential in nature that I'm not going to talk about here, but we are looking at more stringent procedures as well. Well, where do we go from here? We have options. I think, if I can quote Dr. Moskaitis, doing nothing is the wrong thing to do. So, the things that we've already implemented, we've already done. They have been some costs. We're going to continue to do the other things that I mentioned, but I think we need to begin a discussion about, do we want to do those man traps, if you will, that construction to the buildings? Do we want to talk about adding personnel back to the elementary buildings? I will say, my suggestion, if we were to go that route, I think it's obviously an open discussion, but my own personal opinion and with the building administrators is if we're going to do that, I think for the cost difference, I think an armed personnel would be the way to go, and not with the security. There's nothing about the security monitors, it's just for the difference, that's the recommendation. One of the things that I did mention that we can do without too much fanfare is the possibility of moving and doing something at the high school. One of the comments came in, you walk in the front door and then you have 25 feet before you get to the security desk. So we're talking about moving the keypad, going to another door, kind of corridoring it off to that station. Other ideas was implement if you will, a central station for monitoring all district buildings. Automatic corridor barriers in the event of a lockdown. And the possibility of installing metal detectors. We also installed one at the academy this summer. Now the one, it's figure about 5,000 a piece. Now obviously with that comes a lot of issues with access to the building. When you have 4,000 or 3,000 students entering the building, that might be an issue with the metal detector, but it's just something to put on the table. I will say we received a lot of correspondence, a lot of suggestions, and a lot of comments. And I want to say formally that all of those suggestions and comments from anyone are welcome. Obviously, we're not going to be able to respond to everyone, but they are not ignored. They are taken seriously. They are considered, and they are discussed. And I think this starts the discussions for obviously for the board and for future recommendations moving forward and what we need or would like to do.
Mike,
and with that, I'd open up.
Mike, I have just to ask the principals, what would happen if they see a student letting another person in the building through one of these locked doors?
Well, I would imagine that discipline
is there some kind of discipline in action?
It happens.
I mean, I'm not talking about another student. Even another student they shouldn't let in. But I mean, especially somebody who may be knocking on the door that they don't know.
Even without asking the principals, I know it does occur.
Yes.
And when they're caught, they are disciplined.
There is a discipline set up for that.
And I think that's where the alarm that Mr. Simona spoke of, that would be on those doors, and if the door gets popped open, it would be.
Well, that's if we put those alarms on.
There are some of those doors at the high school.
Yeah.
We had dollars that we used last year for trying to help our deficit out, which I think a lot of us looked at and said, that's not what those dollars are for. I believe it's the designated surplus. We had like 13 plus million in there last year, and we used $1 million to try to help ourselves with the budget. And like I said before, a lot of us don't agree with that, and I don't. That money is used for specific areas, emergency situations, things that I think aren't very important. And when I think it comes to security, this is the time to look at some of those options and use some of those dollars. And if it becomes 500,000 or 750,000, I think we really need to look at that. Because I think overall, it obviously just is something that we're taking, one, proactive. Two, we do a lot of things in this district that are very proper for security. As a former principal, and obviously looking at your principals, your first thing is not totally the educational component. When you walk through that door every day, it's the health, safety, and welfare of your kids. So by looking at that fund, I think it's in the vicinity of $12 million, we might be able to use that as, quote, the rainy day policy and say, hey, this is important.
Just to clarify, there's two funds
Okay.
to look at for that purpose. That $12 million fund is what they call the designated surplus. That has already been established and designated for certain items. Very simply, by board resolution,
Yes.
we can redesignate a portion of that money for something else. The other area is the capital reserve, which is approximately $4.5 million. And again, that it's the board's at the board's discretion to use for whatever they want for building projects.
What I would like to see happen, if everybody is in agreement, we got updates today, and I think it's important to see that a lot of the things that we heard today, we already implemented long before there was any of these horrific tragedies. So we were on the track going, and I think some of these tragedies that have occurred made us look at things differently, made us see other things. One thing I would like to do is Mike, if next month, if it's possible, for you to bring forth some of your recommendations for the cost, time, different things of that nature, so we can start kicking around specific ideas and then get votes on them and begin moving forward.
Recommendations in priority order, or just the
I
things that
think
they
in priority order, the things you hear from when you walk through with the things that you would like to see with cost, with time, effectiveness, things of that nature. That way we can discuss, pick apart those things and where we want to go, and and get a vote on it. Because I don't think that these things that you brought up that we should be doing or we should be looking into, I think are great. I think it's something that needs to be done, and we definitely should drag our feet on it. So I'd like to see next Buildings and Grounds Committee if we have some solid recommendations.
I would just, one thing before you go, you mentioned about the local committees. I mean, we're scheduled to hook up next week, and we also put a call into the state committees as well. They do that, professionally. So I would like to make sure that before we make any recommendations or decisions, we at least have their input. I can come next month.
Well, I mean, if you don't have any time by then obviously it wouldn't be. But I mean, basically, I just like to not drag our feet on it. And as soon as we can get recommendations in that we can discuss and look to move forward, I think the faster the better.
Along that line, first I'd like to thank you, Mr. Simonetta. That was a very good summary, in my opinion, at a very sensitive time. I would like to make 2 points. Would be much like 9/11. Once you envision what can happen, I think it's government's responsibility to respond, knowing you can't eliminate risk, but you can reduce risk. And along that line, you've mentioned a lot of great procedural things. But I think we have to really accelerate the timeline on implementation of capital spending. And I, for one, would be absolutely in favor of using the reserve for this topic. Along with use technology. If it means metal detectors to make our students, staff safer, let's do it, and let's make a commitment to have this done sooner rather than later. I think we owe that to the public, because I'm sure every one of you had a hard time sleeping. And I imagine ourselves that if it were here, and it could have been here, how would you feel as a parent, a grandparent,
as a board member. So we have to do, and we have the power to do. So you're right, your paraphrase is doing nothing is not acceptable, actually. And so I think now it's what is the right thing to do, and it should be a federal and a state level topic with recommendations and dollars. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So I think we have to do the right thing. And I would like to hear those recommendations, and let's advance this with a date for when we're going to have improved security for our buildings. So thank you for being on it, Mr. Simmons.
Any other questions?
Well, just note one thing is that none of these incidences that have happened has happened in a big city school. They've always happened in small city schools or on the outskirts of cities and so forth. So we're not looking, like something, we don't, like New York City, Philadelphia, inside Philadelphia. We're a small city in a sense. Even though we're a big school, we're still out of the city, and we're still a small city school district in a sense. So we, I don't want to say we're right, but what's happened in the past should be a guide for us in the future. And I agree with Dr. Moskaitis. We can't ignore the past any longer.
Any other questions regarding security?
Just have one comment, Mr. Simonetto. After you do your walkthroughs with, police departments, and will you have an opportunity to talk with the principal of each building?
I'm sorry, I
They're
didn't
going to go
mention, the
with
principal
you.
will be with us.
Okay.
I didn't mean to, I forgot to mention it.
Yeah, they often know their buildings much better than anybody
Absolutely.
else, and know where the little areas are
Mhm.
that most people don't know where they are. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none.
I have one quick comment. I just wanted to say this publicly. I had a chance not too long ago to speak with a lieutenant at the Easton Police Department. And this is, nothing on record or anything, no formal type of meeting, but I do want to take a chance to commend them on their help they've been giving us lately. I, for one, wasn't aware of the amount of help that the Easton Police Department helps us out with. And I'd like to commend them, as well as Palmer and Forks in the work that they do.
Just lastly, just to piggyback on Vandenberg, I was at Paxinosa when Lieutenant Castro from Easton came up and talked to Mr. Hightower. And he didn't come and say, can we, do you mind? He said, listen, you're going to have our officers patrol the building. They're going to get out, walking the building. If you need any help, do you mind? Is that okay with you? I don't think Mr. Hightower I don't think he had a choice. I think it had to be yes, that's what he wanted to do. But, Mr. Hightower and him spoke, and then Palmer and Forks did the same thing. They didn't wait for us to come to them, to ask help. They came to us and said, listen, we want to help. So, we're really thankful to our local police departments for that. Any other questions? Seeing none, any public to be heard on the buildings and grounds agenda items?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Once again, Bill Jones, and I'm going to speak on yesterday, if you don't mind. First off, Mr. Pitabo, no, I didn't want to get up twice. After you delivered your trees, there was actually an SOS sound sent out from Mr. Hightower's building. His nurse got a hold of us bus drivers, and we were able to give a tree to a young man's family thanks to the fire department. They donated the tree. My husband took it. We got a stand. He put it up, and somebody else got a tree, and it was very nice.
Just before you move on, I know you want to talk about something like yesterday.
Yeah.
As long as it pertains to security or something that's on today's agenda. Because we're doing agenda items right now, non-agenda
I
will be a little
believe
later.
so. If it's security,
I think so.
We were there yesterday, the buses. Personally, I feel that had it been a real bomb, Mrs. Simonetta, no offense to you, but every one of our children would have been blown up. I say that because First off, the bus drivers did not even find out about it, nor did transportation, until we started to pull in to middle school to pick up. One of our drivers actually started to load up, was then called, a principal called transportation and said, unload that bus and get that bus out of here. What are you talking about? So everything you spoke about tonight dealt with keeping it inside, okay? I heard nothing about when you have to go outside. Transportation is never involved except for when Leon Fisher was here. Leon Fisher came up to me personally, proposed an idea, and that was that the bus drivers would sign on free of charge, okay, no cost to the district, to go to each school and do an evacuation. Unfortunately, Leon Fisher's not here no more. We accomplished it with one school, and rest assured, I'm not going to say which school, okay, but rest assured, that school will be evacuated and the children will be taken away, okay, not left there. Kids yesterday, they were on the sidewalk. If nothing else, let us pull in, get these kids out of there. Doesn't matter what bus they belong on, let us take them somewhere, get them out. Okay.
First of all, you're correct about let us get out. Well, I hear what you're saying about let us get them out. That was not, I think you should know, everybody should know, that was not a school district decision not to let you pick up the kids. That was the police department that would not let you guys in and not pick up the kids.
The kids were already outside, Mr. Pickle.
They were outside, but
Disrespect,
they
yes.
didn't want the bus in. That was the police.
Well, that was my next thing, if I could, okay? As a bus driver, we are familiar with the area also, okay? Front could have went like on Wagner Avenue, get them all out there. We could have had buses on Park Road, load them up, get them out. In the back, they could have went out in the new field, or you could have taken them through the new field and load them up on that new road and Parker, because there is a path there. Okay, the children and the teachers, okay, would not have been around. All we're asking, okay, from the bus drivers is, you know, let us in on things. Let us help you get a plan, devise a plan. Okay, we're not asking for money here. Everything's about dollars. We're saying, look, we'll help. We did it with Mr. Fisher, okay? We came in, we did it, and that it was a Palmer school. Okay, Palmer police were there, they're great. They really are.
Ms. Jones, have you brought your request for wanting to help and be involved to Mr. Simonetta?
No, and I'm going to have to say it again, no disrespect to anybody, but every time I'm told to take my request someplace other than here, it's kick the can down the alley. Okay? Anything I've taken to anyone, not just hasn't got any response at all this year. So this is my only forum. Okay? I ask that you please let us help. Okay? The union has already given their blessing. We will do it. We will do what you need us to do. To help. Thank you.
Mr. Ryan.
In the past.
Mr. Chairman, after
Mr. Volcano, 1 second, please. Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Chairman, after hearing the Helen's comments, I have a question for Mr. Simonetta. Do we, in our emergency planning operations, have we run any full-scale exercises or partial-scale exercises involving not just the police come in and on a weekend and doing a search or something, but where we practice with the bus drivers and other administrators how to evacuate a school? Have we done any actual?
I don't know. I don't really know that answer.
Because we may have it on plan, but unless we exercise the plan.
In my presentation before, one of the things we are looking at, and maybe one of the principals can answer those evacuation plans.
Well, I think our security
to the building, but I did say one of the main things we're looking at is reviewing and revising our crisis and our evacuation procedures, and that is high on the priority.
Thank you.
And I'll
One school, Mr. Riley did it.
One school did it?
Yeah,
Full
with the
scale
bus
exercise?
drivers anyway, yes, one school. I may as well say it was Tracy. Mr. Steckel was very proactive on anything, that comes to him, really. Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one quick question. Mr. Riley would probably be more familiar with this than I. Not only even safety, I mean, we have to, in this plan, develop also something with hazmat. We're talking about a bomb or so forth, but materials that might be brought into our school that are a danger to our students and our faculty and our staff. I mean,
I'm pretty sure it's identified in your crisis plan.
right, okay, because I know it's there, but I'm saying is I don't think we've ever had we never had a demonstration or a practice on the hazmat program. And it's something we might, want to look at in the future. That's not necessary. I think security first, then you look at hazmat.
I have one more person who's public comment, but Dr. Simeon, whose building was involved yesterday. Do you have some words you'd like to say?
I thank everyone for their comments. However, what actually happened yesterday was a rehearsed drill. It was very much in accordance with the state-mandated procedures for evacuation. We followed to the letter of the law what we needed to do. The police all commented on the professionalism and the effectiveness of that evacuation. The students were very cooperative. The teachers took charge of the situation. It proceeded flawlessly. We kept everybody safe. When the buses came, teachers walked students around. They were not at any time unescorted. They were on the sidewalks of the buses, of the bus aprons, because we needed to get the students out of there as soon as possible, so that we could get them in out for the elementary schools to proceed. It did take us time to get everyone out, but we took a couple more minutes. As far as, I don't know, I'm not aware of any bus, but I will check on it tomorrow. Any bus that wasn't allowed to enter, the police were running everything. So everything was done, and there were 4 municipalities there in addition to the state police and the Bethlehem Bomb Squad. So everything that was done there was in accordance with their plans, and they commented on the effectiveness of the operations. So I just wanted to make that clear, make the board aware of that, and comment, and also to praise the staff and the students for their cooperation yesterday, and for the central administration in helping us through this evacuation.
Thank you, Dr. Simeon. Mr. Anderson.
I know nothing about security, and knee-jerk doesn't necessarily solve much. But a physical observation, if there is no exposure to a particular risk, then the risk drops down. And by that I mean if a building is empty, your risk profile diminishes tremendously. And I think in that light, we need to take a very serious look at non-district activities within a building, whether it be daycare or anything else that involves children. That it may not be an appropriate risk to have the building open early or late and other people in there, given that we have no way of controlling crazies. Now, let them go someplace else. But you have a duty to what you're doing, and simply put, if there's nobody there, that particular event can't happen in that profile. The second thing is, I think we need to take a fresh look at vehicle traffic. The FBI reports suggest that the weapon of choice in getting rid of somebody is a club or a hammer, and I don't know about that. But I do know that a motor vehicle is a pretty useful weapon. And it's also a pretty useful problem that if you're trying to get fire or police or other vehicles in and out of the site, and you've got a bunch of parents running there willy-nilly, they're going to add to the problem. And even such a thing as every parent's God-given right to get up and run down to the school and drop their kid off in the morning and run over and pick them up in the afternoon, I think needs to be re-examined. We have a professional bus service. We have ways of getting people to and from school. And just having congregations of buildings, at least in today's light, goes beyond crosswalk management and things like that. 30 cars zipping in and out of March School, or 35 cars coming in and out of Shawnee, is just one more unnecessary security risk. Now, I don't know how to eliminate it, but you probably can find ways of containing it by making it less convenient for parents to pick up, drop off, and run over every time they hear something on some sort of social media site that says, hey, we've got a problem. I'm sure you had 50 parents come driving over insisting upon their Johnny. I don't blame them. But it didn't help anything in terms of managing that particular site. And God help you if there had been an event of any sort, the parents would have added to the confusion. So I think you need to take a fresh look at reducing your risk profile of who's there, who's running in, who's running out, who's parking on the parking lot, things like that. I could put an awfully strange thing in the back of my car beyond a dead fish and cause all kinds of problems. We just don't need to be in those kinds of businesses in today's world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anyone else from the public have those Brown's agenda items? Seeing none. Summary. Letter A, Energy Savings Plan. We're going to move that to next week's board meeting. UGI Service Agreement. I don't believe Dr. Plano we're moving it. Are we going to move it, or are we just giving it to us?
We have to vote to give it to you.
Okay, so we will be moving that to next week. We have nothing to move for security, but we will be getting your recommendations as soon as you can get them to us or faster. And that's it. We'll move on to finance. Thank you.
Mr. Mineta, back to budget.
All right, well, what I'm going to do tonight is get us back on track on where we're at with the budget, refresh our memories from almost 2 months ago. We'll first look at the budget that was presented and talk about what we need to do moving forward. If you recall, at this stage, our deficit is about $4.2 million. In February, we anticipate that you will see our first stab at trying to balance that deficit. That was right now it's a 3.4% increase, and the only thing that's increasing is salary, pension obligation, and medical benefits. Remind everyone, part of our issue this year is the loss in specific revenues. The net reduction in revenue as a result of Regalsville leaving is about $900,000. We're putting a more realistic number on the collections rate for the taxes, which probably netted in a loss of about $1 million. And right now we're appropriating only $500,000 from surplus versus $1.5 million that we appropriated this year. Well, I stated that the average tax increase at the index, which is 2.1%, was approximately $68. If we go down to the base index, which is 1.7%, that average increase is $55. So that's where we left it, and where we're at now is we have three options. The first option is passing a resolution at the January meeting indicating that we will not exceed the cap. Doesn't mean we have to go to the cap, 2.1%. Doesn't mean we have to go there, but if we pass that resolution, that we're not going to exceed it. The other option is apply for exceptions. Under the law, there's three categories for exceptions. Pension, construction, and special education. We would, on preliminary calculations, we would qualify for two of those exceptions. Would not result in too much money from special education costs, but under the pension obligations, we could possibly increase our budget $3 million. Going for exceptions, we would have to approve a preliminary budget. It is really based on what I presented before, just putting it in the state format. Approve the preliminary budget at the January meeting, stating that we're going to apply for exceptions. They would have to be presented to the state by March 7th. The third option is a voter referendum, which means we don't apply for exceptions, and we're saying that we're going to send the budget in as is and raise the tax levy to balance the current deficit. Again, we would have to approve a preliminary budget make it available for public inspection by the end of this month, which could be done. And resolution to PDE, saying we're going to go that route. We have to contact the county elections. And by March 22nd is our deadline for the referendum question. And my understanding is the question is just simply, do the voters approve to approve additional tax revenue to balance the budget at this particular level? We work with the attorney on more than that resolution.
It will have the percentage there that would be needed to balance.
Actually, in the statute, it says the wording is pretty well spelled out.
Okay.
And last year, if you recall, we, at the January meeting, which is the deadline, we approved the resolution not to exceed the index. And that allowed us to work on the budget all the way up until, May is the deadline for the preliminary budget adoption by the board. If we're not going to exceed the index, we have a goal of doing it in April, and then the final in May.
I guess,
On the voter referendum, if the voters do not seek an increase in taxes, does that fall back then to the cap, or does that fall to zero? Where does that go from if it's not approved?
I think it all depends how the question is worded. If we're asking to exceed by this much, then, this much, whatever they vote down, that's what we have to go back to. And I think I'm not sure, but I think we can work that.
Yeah, let me take a shot at that. You asked my question beforehand, and we will follow up and get a precise answer. But I think, Bill, since the referendum has to take place at the primary election, which is typically around May 7th, thereabouts.
Third Tuesday in May.
Well, anyway, you've got 6 weeks basically to come up with a budget, which would have to be within the index. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Now, whether or not we can still combine that with the seeking of exceptions, I'm not sure.
My understanding is, and I can answer, my understanding right now is, if we go for voter referendum, we are not entitled to an exception.
It could be.
But if it goes down in May, could we apply that? I don't think we can.
It could be. I'll say, I represent a lot of schools, and I'll tell you, ever since the act has come into effect, I haven't. Not one of them has had gone to referendum, so it'll be no experience.
That's been my difficulty in getting all the facts.
Well, nobody has. I mean, around here. Frank, you have.
I'm not looking to go above index. I'm hoping we can stay far away from index as possible. With that being said, we all have been elected by the people to represent the people. It may be a good idea to ask the people what they want. And do you want your taxes raised 3.25 for this reason, or I think 3.5% covered, right?
No, 7.5% would cover the $4 million difference.
7%. I mean, I think that's something we definitely should discuss, and getting the input from the public and see how they feel about it.
The referendum question is, I think, philosophically a very interesting one for this board to consider. The fact that it isn't used very much in Pennsylvania shouldn't dissuade us from thinking about this. And the reason I say that is, last year I was a big advocate for 0%. And we had a parade of people that came up and said, how could you do that? How dare you? We had people who said, well, it's only the price of a pizza. And we had a back and forth on that. We're going to face with a situation where you're saying that because largely of compensation issues, to make the budget whole, you'd have to have a 7.5% tax increase. Is that what
yes.
you said, Mark? the ultimate form of democracy is let people vote and let people choose. Because the voices that we don't often hear enough of is the taxpayer, the voter. And yes, they've elected us, and we could make that decision ourselves. And we'll do the best job we can as a group of 9. But the referendum is an interesting way to engage the public and for this board to find out what is it they want. And then we can act accordingly. So I'd like to know more about the mechanics of this and what it would mean for us being able to do our jobs.
Mr. President, we would have to be assured that if the referendum did not pass, that we could go back to the 2.1%. We may not be able to raise anything. That's the question we have to ask. If we go to referendum and we can't raise 2.1%, if it's no, then we're really in a fix. So that would be the necessary question. And if we look at our neighbor just to the west, they've never got a referendum passed on in Phillipsburg on their school budget, and I'm not so sure that the citizens, even though I have a lot of faith in them and they've elected me 9 times to office, that they would go for a 7.5% increase in this economic state.
If this board chooses to go to referendum, Attorney Freund, can't they ask the question in a way of taxpayers that it would be above the index?
That'd be the only reason it goes.
Right. So it would, to understand that it would be above the index.
So you still get the 2.1.
There needs to be clarity there.
So the clarity point is that we can drop back to the 2.1.
Well, that would have to be researched, though.
I think that is something for...
We'll confirm that, Dr. Valentino,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure that...
As long as we had assurance on that, I'm not against hearing from the public, but I'm just saying is 7.5 is a big number in this economy. We're moving ahead, the economy is growing slowly, but I'm not so sure the public is going to vote on that, even though I have a lot of faith in the public.
I think there's a combination of 2 things. One is we're here and we have to be concerned about raising the tax dollars and everything. The second part is balancing that against the quality of education that's provided and everything. And so therefore, on that basis, that's what we have to look at. And not everybody, we can say the word, or they can say the words, but at the same time, you have to look at the cost with it. And they're looking, I think, to the ones that have been elected here to help make those tough decisions based on the knowledge that we gain that takes over this year and over years of time on how you're going to do that.
Yes.
So, but if we are moving this route, I think there's a couple things here. One is Attorney Freund will be looking at and coming back with an answer before we take a vote. Number 2, we do have to take some action or whatever as far as the cap. And number 3 ends up being Mr. Simonetta has to put together to be prepared based on what our decision would be at that point in time, so we could vote on it as well.
From a 2.1 index, if we had looked at the exceptions, we say you do qualify for some of those, what would that percentage be at that point in time? So we go from 2.1, if we did the exceptions, where would we be at that?
We'd be at about 5%.
5%.
And our deficit might be low enough that possibly from the reserve we can make up the 2%. So I think that's a big
With the exceptions, roughly about $1 million would be the difference.
Yeah.
Getting that exception.
Right.
And the difference in income.
Yes, and that might be reasonable to take out of the reserve.
And we also have to keep in mind that these obligations that we're held to, we still have them next year as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can't, you know, I mean, you can, we have to look at ways out.
And you can't continually take down your reserve based on a budgetary issue.
No.
That's what we're dealing with. We looked at $3 million last year as taking from the budgetary reserve, and then decided to take, I think, $1 million or $1.5 million. And a lot of us didn't want to go that direction. And now if we look at reserve again, we take the $12 million and we keep whittling it down, and if we have to do it for the next couple of years because of contractual obligations, we're in trouble.
And I think last year, you know, we didn't vote on anything, but last year our discussion was if we had to tap into the reserve this year, I believe it was the $500,000 we all felt comfortable with. You know, so we tapped in reserve this year. Next year we're you know, still dealing with these same obligations. So, and that's why I brought it up. You know, we have to watch what we're taking from, you know, and when, because we're not out of the woods after this year.
Exactly.
I think one of the things that's very tough for this board and the public is if you raise taxes by 7.5% to meet compensation obligations, that does nothing to improve the quality of education in this district. Nothing.
Dr. Muscardis, you're right. The only thing it does is keep us even. That doesn't raise it. It keeps us even where we're at now.
Even with what?
Well, it keeps us what our needs are without increasing our needs. You know, it's like it's like inflation. If you, you know, I don't want to say, but if you have inflation goes up 2% and you get a 2% raise, did you get raised? You broke out even. Okay, so if we need 7% to meet our obligations now, and we get 7%, did we really raise anything, like you say, any for the quality of education in our district, or did we just keep it even?
And you'll be followed with another 7.5% or more, probably. In a time when the taxpayer is receiving 0 raises
right, that's
to 1% raises.
Right.
So what's the right thing to do?
Just as a clarification on that, still a lot, but if we raise the base, we raise that 7.5% for this year, that deficit gets reduced because our base is going to be higher starting point for the following budget.
Right. Well, if
It'll
we raise it 10%, we'll even be in better shape.
I'm not saying it's good shape. I'm saying it'll still be high, but it wouldn't be that same deficit that I projected last year.
But we're still going to be in a position where we have to look at increasing taxes.
No doubt.
It might be a percentage or a 0.5% lower than what we're looking at now.
But I think it's, Mr. President, I think Mr. Simonetta has to come back with us with some more final in numbers before we make that decision.
Well, he has to, because in 2 weeks that vote has to be taken.
Right.
So at that meeting, he has to present some final numbers, along with Mr. Freund presenting, some of the legal opinion, and at that point, the vote then has to occur.
The legal ramifications of something like that.
Is everybody, basically hearing around this table? I haven't heard anybody say that we shouldn't proceed in getting all those pieces of information together.
We should have everything, to make a decision. We should have everything.
Is there any other comments or thoughts on this process? If not, Mike, that's all you have. I will then ask if there's any comments from the floor on, obviously, the budget. No hands? With that, the only thing that will be coming up, or again, in 2 weeks, will be setting us up to determine which the votes are, either referendum or capping it, or how we want to move on the budget. Saying that, something I need to acknowledge a couple things. Tonight, again, as we're moving ahead, making some changes, we tried to streamline our meetings. It's almost 9 o'clock now. We didn't do a good job of disciplining ourselves tonight here. But also, along those same lines, and something I think that we saw that worked real well when Dr. Simeon got up, we do have a couple with the principals here, and I do appreciate that, because I think one of the things as we look forward at meetings are items that have not been addressed to the principals in the past and everything and seem to come up here. It'll be nice that we can have them addressed by the principals and taken offline, because really they should have that opportunity and everything before it's brought to the board's attention. Because, 90% of the time probably, a lot of things can always be resolved at a much lower local type of level as compared to raising it. So I think with making that change, again, trying to further streamline these meetings, and I think as everybody saw, it gets a little late on the committee night, but hopefully on the board nights we make up for it, because basically that comes down to a lot more voting than it does all the discussion that goes on. So I hope you can appreciate that as well. So with that, I will say thank you. At this point, I'll open it up if there's any other comments from the floor.
Actually, only came with one tonight.
You had two already.
In an earlier meeting, I commented on the substitute hiring and retention process. And I was actually surprised that we unlearned some things that Dennis Reichert did, and that's shuffling to save money. But I appreciate we may have to do that. There's a problem, and it's not a big problem. It's not $1 million problem. We just say it's a $500,000 problem. To put it in perspective, we may wind up paying people who should have paid in the first place. And that aggravates me as a taxpayer. Let's pay the right people the first amount, the correct amount. An obvious example is veterans' preference, which I don't think is true here in Easton, but I saw where a district had to make amends for about 9 years of being not hired an E8 into a position of teacher. And that's expensive for not bringing the right person on board. And seriously, I think veterans' preference is something that's an absolute mandatory. We got to do it because they did it for us. And I've got friends who went to NOM who are still bitter about the way we treated things. If you hire somebody as an emergency, I think the rules require that in the beginning of the year you're required to keep looking. And we had some personnel managers in the past of a female bent who stopped looking. Well, if the right person came along, I think they might have a very interesting point of taming. I think we've stopped that, but still room to keep looking. But then the issue of who comes and who goes. If Dr. Moskaitis and I are both teaching a particular topic and he's got more seniority, and you get laid off and he gets called back for a substitute role, that's fine. If I get called back later, that's fine. But if the person that he's covering for comes back before me, before my person comes back, do I stay if he goes? No. He bumps me all over again if I understand the rigid rules. So we are required to shuffle, and he's got a perfect right to bounce me on the way back out again. I didn't write the rules, but I say pay attention to the rules. But what brings up the point that I raised the last time, and I dug back in. David Andrews gave a fancy presentation to the Pennsylvania Association of School Personnel Administrators. It was about a 47-page handout and a copy of 1 page. He talks about returning to long-term or short-term vacancies. And he says the court held suspended professional employee has the right to return to a long-term vacancy and get per diem pay. Sounds fine? That's nice. Casey Sykes says pickup versus Sharon City Schools. Me, I read the case. Case does not say that. You can't get from what he's saying to what they're talking about. But what the case really says is if you're coming in to cover for somebody on an approved leave of absence, you get your full pay. The court does not say approved leave of absence means 10 days, 15 days, 90 days. Approved leave of absence means 1 day. That's what it said. That's what you have in your contract. That's what you all do. And I think there's some teachers that aren't very bright and a union leader who's even less bright than that. Next comment he makes, court said per diem vacancies due to sickness or discipline do not require recall. Sounds logical. Or is it? And he cites Nelson versus West